To go here.
Yeah, it is now being recorded.
It is now being recorded. Welcome to our work session for May 16th. We don't have any board and commission interviews, so we're just going to move right along here. I know Scott is sitting right there, almost in the front row, ready to go. But we will, is there anything that anyone wants to talk about on the regular agenda? All right, moving on past that, then manager, mayor, council, other updates. Sarah, we'll start with you, I guess.
I don't
No?
have any today.
Okay.
Nothing for me.
Emerson, all right.
Yes, sustainability met last night and they've got several things going on. One of the newest and coolest things is that they're gonna be doing this EcoEd series from August through November, and they've got speakers from really, prominent organizations in St. Louis, such as the Botanical Garden, a speaker from WashU. They're gonna do a collaboration with the middle school and Missouri River Cities. They forwarded language about safe street ordinance to staff. They're reviewing that. This coming Thursday, the 25th, is going to be the last, or one of the last EcoEd series by Green Space. And we're going to have a hydrology expert from WashU. And that is it for sustainability. And then tomorrow morning, bright and early, 8:30, BBC is having their coffee and networking event at the Recplex, and the whole purpose of that is to kind of just get in touch with business owners and see what they would like to do, how the city can help them in the future. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. David,
I was just gonna follow.
microphone.
Thank you. I was just gonna follow up on Mayor Arnold's memo regarding how to put things on the agenda of items. I mean, how to put items on the agenda. And I just wanted, and I'd like to have that discussion, but I'd also like to have a broader discussion about the role of the liaison to the boards and commissions in order to help streamline and ensure that we as council members are protecting staff resources and time. That way, we're not having tons of subcommittee meetings that are going to require a lot of staff time. I think we as liaisons can assist in that in some form or fashion. I just like to understand the scope of the role a little bit better, or what we envision.
All right, I will. Marie did not, and I did not have a regular meeting, but I think probably the best thing for us to do, since I now have heard from several of you about that memo, we have since received boards and commissions request form from the city manager, that maybe we go ahead and schedule that for a specific work session slot. Since it's been talked about by enough of us, I think we have whatever threshold we come up with, we've met that threshold. So
About what to talk about.
yeah, exactly. And then just talk a little bit about the liaison. I'll remind people that in the boards and commissions ordinance that we recently passed, there is a description of the liaison. And so I think that's a good place for us to start. So Dr. Peoples, if you will help me remember that we will, and Katie as well, that we will get that on a work session schedule. We actually have some openings coming up after a long run of not having any windows whatsoever. So
We do.
all right, thank you.
Let's see, Green Space met and Historic Preservation also met. Both are working on their priorities upcoming to just talk about kind of how they want to structure their time and energies. And I went over with both of them, the boards and commissions section update and the sponsored events update as well.
Great, thank you.
And it's, I think Pam already said that we've got the EcoEd talk on May 18th, and I think that one's at Larson Park. So it's a different venue. The other ones.
I have, okay.
How about if we check the city calendar to make sure that we
Yes,
have the
I
right
think-
date, because we have
I am having-
conflicting days here.
Yes, I think I am recalling that date got amended later after.
Okay,
Yes, there was a date change.
There was a, yeah,
Yeah.
and it
So-
is at Larson Park, which is different.
Larson Park. Okay,
May
so
18th.
the 18th is the date. Okay, Echo Ed on the 18th. Got it. Okay, thank you. That's what you printed on the flyer. Okay, the flyer wins. Katie, do you have anything?
No, thank you.
And
We're here.
I don't know what technically is going on over there, but I'm gonna go ahead and go. Okay, thank you.
I have nothing.
Thank you. You can continue to fix the furniture. I'll do my little bit here. You all received in the packet, we had a request from the churches together, that those churches in Webster Groves to participate in Wear Orange Day, which is on June 4th. For those of you, I think everyone here knows that is a day in which you wear orange for essentially to stand up against gun violence. We have been invited to participate in the march, which starts at noon in front of Webster Groves Presbyterian Church, just that way. And we'll go down to Emmanuel Episcopal Church, and then there'll be some speakers at Emmanuel at the conclusion. Starts at noon. We've been asked to consider passing a resolution that will support Wear Orange Day in our community and to designate the 4th as Wear Orange Day in Webster Groves. What do we think about doing all these things?
I'm fine with it. Absolutely.
No, I'm totally supportive. What time did you say that the march ends?
Well, it starts at noon, so I'm gonna guess 20 minutes to walk down there, another half an hour of speakers, so maybe an hour for the entire
That sounds good, because we have
thing.
a commitment at 1:30 at the art fair.
Oh, yeah, that's the same day, right? So then we can just go across the street.
On top of the calendar.
Yeah, by the way, thank you for that. Has everyone signed up to work the art fair who is able to do so? If you have not, please do so. Okay. Yes, thank you for that reminder. All right, so it's a working day for city council on the 4th of June. Okay, so then so you've been invited. Everyone's okay with the resolution and gives myself and Katie. There's some templates out there, Katie, that we can use. And then part of that resolution will designate the 4th as Wear Orange Day, and we'll put it on the sign outside. All right, without objection,
good.
that is agreed to. All right, so that was,
Assume we're all providing our own orange attire.
yes,
We're
we
not
are.
doing like a
Yes,
I was gonna read the resolution at that event.
that is the plan. Yeah. But I couldn't commit to that until we agreed to do it. So we're getting there.
We have a tie-dye event to, dye some orange, some shirts.
I'm gonna absolutely be happy to go to your house and do that. Emerson.
And so much spirit wear, and I don't need.
Couple other dates. If you have not let Katie know and you want to go to the Muni League dinner, which is a week from Thursday, please let her know. I think we're closing out on reservation time. I did, because it is not an actual ordinance of the city. It's something from the Historical Society. They asked me to send a representative from the mayor to the Webster Groves Historical Society Board. Jack Perosi has agreed to serve in that position. So he has gone to a couple of those meetings. And then Sarah and I just wanted to mention, have had 2 meetings now with Carrie Aarons from the Chelsea Center at the high school to talk about ways in which we can work with students. And they're doing a big reconstruction revision of their essentially civics curriculum, which makes me so happy. But we're working on things that we might be able to do to participate, and have been consulting with Marie about staff participation as well. And again, respecting time that staff might have. I think that's it.
Mayor, for your appointment to the Historic Society,
Yeah.
is he interested in being a joint appointment with HCP?
Let's just say I'm working on that,
Okay.
hoping that he won't watch the video and see that I'm still working on him on that. All right, anyone? No one? Okay, is the furniture fixed over there?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, good. We can proceed then. I don't want any distractions from what Scott's gonna have to do here. All right, our topic for today is the Aquatic Center Master Plan. I know we have a presentation, and then I know probably lots of questions. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am actually going to turn it over right away to George from Councilman Hunsaker. He's been our consultant who's been leading our master plan process. And he's actually going to run you through the slide deck, and then he and I will both tag team any questions you may have as we go through that presentation around. So George.
Okay, or is it wireless?
Welcome.
All right, good evening. Thank you for the time this evening. It's been great to work with Scott and his team over the past few months on looking at the future of the Aquatic Center. And so what I'd like to do is just run through a couple of slides here, and then we will take questions and comments and go from there. Oh, is it? Oh, I see. Okay. Well, there we go. Let's see. I'll just keep right on the arrow there. So we started back at the end of 2022, and really we're scoped with three primary areas. The first was just to look at the existing facility, its uses, its functions, the need for continuing aquatics here in Webster Groves, as well as engaging with the community on what that would look like, how they utilize the facility, what they would like to see that maybe is not currently here. We held both an open community meeting as well as pushed out an online survey. And then we also met with vested stakeholder groups that, were specific to aquatics. From there, we looked at several different master plan alternatives. In January, we came back to the community, held another public meeting, received additional input at that point, and then are still working through the final phases of the plan. So I mentioned the timeline started in December and are coming toward the end of the project right now. In terms of community feedback, we got a lot of great responses. The community is very passionate about the Aquatic Center. Some of the things are up here, but really what we found is that outdoor aquatics is really just a key component and a key need for quality of life for the residents here in Webster Groves. We found that indoor aquatics was something that received strong support, the ability to have year-round swimming. And then we also found, just that there was a great need with local high schools, local competitive swim groups for a competition pool, but also that competition pool that could be multi-purposed into swimming lessons, water fitness, lap swim, recreational swim. But again, with that vision for some type of year-round aquatic facility here within the city. We also looked at an online survey. Scott and his team did a great job of pushing out a survey and then pushing it out again and pushing it out again. And so we got over 1,000 responses. A lot of times we push out a survey and maybe it only gets pushed out once, and we'll get 300 to 400 and we'll see a spike and then it'll lag off. But Scott and his team, like I said, did a great job, and we got 3 spikes. So we got 400 to 500, another 300, then another 200 to 300 throughout. The majority of people were residents of Webster Groves. The majority of people had utilized the Aquatic Center for the summer of 2022. A lot of them had children under the age of 18. But what we really found with the survey is, again, just a lot of great feedback. We have 500 plus open-ended comments and responses that weren't specific to a multiple choice question. But it really, it reiterated the fact that the Aquatic Center is valued specifically for outdoor recreational swimming, and that they really like the existing layout. And that's what we found throughout our community input meetings as well. And so the survey really backed up. There was nothing that the survey brought to us that really wasn't said at the community meeting or vice versa. They really worked, both of them worked together. And then we also looked at the market. We look at age, income, population density. We look at, you see the map there of other area facilities that offer, indoor and outdoor aquatics. I think probably the biggest point, our company having been based in this area for 50+ years now, is that really the standard in this area is that every city has its outdoor seasonal swimming facility. That's how it's really always been. And we just really see that continuing as a trend, because we've updated, the aquaport in Maryland Heights recently. Chesterfield is looking at, what to do with their facility that's aging. Ferguson has looked at there's just cities all around that, we're looking at their outdoor aquatic facilities. And so when we started to look and nail down what the program of spaces would be, we met with Scott and his team, we met with the community, met with the stakeholders, took the survey results, but really found, it's obviously going to stay in the existing space, being able to provide more shade, more tables. That was one of the biggest requests that we had. Is there a way that, on those high capacity days, there's just not enough shade and tables and chairs for everybody? So is there a way to increase that? And then we also looked at the different aquatic specific features. And again, it came back to really implementing what you all already have. You all were at the forefront of the Municipal Family Aquatic Center when this facility was built. You all, St. Charles was another one that had a zero depth entry, that had a current channel or a lazy river. It had water slides. It had a separate lap pool. So the pieces of the puzzle that were implemented back then are actually still very functional. And we heard that from the community that's really what they like. And so we came back initially with 3 separate budget ranges. We had kind of a 6 million, an 8 million, and then a close to a 10 million. And you can see how those lay out there. They all had a lap pool, because that was essential to be able to, host a summer swim team, one of the largest in the region, to be able to just provide open recreational area. And then the size of the leisure pool, expanded as we went up, as did the size of the lap pool. And so you can see how those different spaces fit within the existing footprint. But what we did find when we showed these to the community in January is that they really felt that a replacement in kind was necessary. They did not want to get smaller, and all of these options would get smaller than what you currently have. And so that was one of the key comments that we heard from the community. Also, we looked at, what would an indoor aquatic facility look like? What types of programs could it host? These are all example pictures of, from water fitness to open recreational swimming, swim lessons, lap swim, water safety classes. The bottom left, it's kind of hard to see, but that pool is set up for water polo. Water polo is one of the growing aquatic sports now. And, the only indoor pool space within the community is at Webster University, and that time is very limited. And so there's definitely a need to have some more indoor water within the area. And so what we looked at was, well, if we have an outdoor lap pool, what would it take to cover that? What could it look like? There's 3 different options that you see there on the right side of the screen. These are permanent structures, but they have the ability to provide some seasonality, either with a retractable dome or retractable roof with garage doors on the side. And so we looked at some of these alternative enclosures to a traditional brick and mortar natatorium. We priced out, what an 8-lane, 25-yard indoor pool would cost with the necessary support spaces. What we found is that number is probably in the $10.5 to $12.5 million range just for the indoor 8-lane pool. And so if we're already going to have an outdoor pool in the program, then we could look at some type of alternative enclosure that would, reduce the cost of that indoor pool here in the city. And so what really we landed on was a full replacement of the spaces that you currently have at the aquatic center. The lap pool, being an essential piece of that, having a large recreational pool with a lazy river with enhanced water slides, having a large zero beach entry, and then a separate children's area as well. That was one of the biggest things that we heard from parents with young children, that they really want that separate children's pool because it just provides a safe space for the kids, say 6 and under, that they're not getting run over by the 7 and ups that are going into the main pool. And the way we cost that out, we look at the cost of, demolition for the existing pools. We look at the cost of the pool amenities, the pool deck, the shade structures, pavilion. We include an allowance for some upgrades to the bathhouse. And so the total project cost there, you see the range 11.8 to 12.6 million, depending on whether, we heard good and bad about the spray pad. Is it, some people didn't think it was necessary. Some really liked having that additional amenity there. But that's where we came in with the overall project cost. And so as we looked at, those 3 initial concepts with that project cost of 6.4 to 9.6, we looked at the replacement option that had a cost of, on the high end, of 12.6. And then we looked at, the enclosure piece plus the addition of some specific locker rooms and staff offices to support that, and utilizing one of the pre-engineered enclosures that came to about just under $4 million to enclose that 8-lane lap pool. So you see there just what the costs are, and also a look at the capacity. And then the other thing that we looked at was, how does this affect the operations of the aquatic center? And so, what does this do for staffing numbers, for utilities, for chemicals, repair and maintenance? And, what we found is that once you get larger, like you have now, that you're recovering more of your cost, and your aquatic center has really your team has done a great job to keep it on that higher end of cost recovery all these years, close to that 90%. When we look at the indoor aquatics, that's something that we see as a subsidized amenity, but we would see an additional, probably close to just under $500,000 in additional expenses for the indoor 8-lane pool, and then recovering just a little over half of that in revenue from swimming lessons, water fitness, lap swim rentals, and things like that. And so I think the other thing to consider when you look at the indoor pool is it'd probably be a little more efficient for cost if right here on this 8-lane outdoor pool, we're showing a little alcove for the diving. But I think in terms of cost, it could just be a standard 8-lane as opposed to an 8-lane L shape. That's that's really going to increase the size of the enclosure, because now you're having to build over that little alcove for diving. And so that's just one consideration to think about as we continue to move forward. And so that is a quick snapshot of what we've been working on since December. At this point, we're finalizing concepts and budgets. That point, the decision we made, which route does the city want to go, in terms of a concept and in terms of a budget, and what that looks like. Then you can determine how to proceed with design and construction, whether it's a traditional design bid build, where you hire an architectural team to design the updates and then bid it out, or you could do a design build where you hire a general contractor that has a design team as part of their team, acquisition of funding, and then you're ready to go. So with that, would love to hear any questions or comments that you might have that either Scott or I could answer.
I appreciate the designs and everything. I think it's really informative, and I think it helps the community understand what's possible. So I thank you very much. One thing, I was trying to find the article that I was reading, but previously I was doing some research to try to figure out the artificial intelligence capabilities of pools in the future, specifically in regards to, especially if we do indoor, we're going to need lifeguards year round. And I think that it seems like we're fortunate that we haven't really struggled to find lifeguards in this community, but just the cost of it is going to increase. And so I think I saw a YMCA, I think out in California, have this new ability, artificial intelligence that eliminates some lifeguards. Are you guys, in your profession, do you see artificial intelligence incorporated in new pool designs? And if so, in what capacity?
Yeah, so there's a couple of systems that have been around for quite a while now, drowning detection systems underneath the water that can, really shoot rays across the pool to figure out if there's something down there that for more than X number of seconds, just because seconds count, when you're talking about being under the water. So I think the one that you probably saw, I think it's newer technology that essentially scans the pool. We've seen some drones used on like beachfront lifeguarding. But the still standard, based upon state and local codes, the Model Aquatic Health Code is to have actual lifeguards. And so I'm not sure that we have a good idea of how that might change as we move forward, but the different systems that are out there now are continuing to get better and better. So I could see it could definitely help to alleviate some of the staffing shortages we've seen.
Excellent. And then how about like with chlorination and everything? Is there artificial intelligence to help with ensuring that there's the right chlorine, everything like that in the pools going forward?
Yeah, and so the new standard now is, obviously chemical automation, and the higher level of chemical controllers now they can be cloud-based. You can control them from your phone. You can get alerts if the chlorine gets too high, too low. You can set all the parameters, so you can even set the range a little bit lower than would be dangerous if too much chlorine got in the pool, so that you can react immediately. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different ways that chemical automation is already doing that, and even getting better as we continue on.
And I would imagine that it leads to eco-friendly pools as
Sure.
well. Then.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes.
Other questions?
Yes, since you asked. I guess this is Scott. I like the concept on all of them. I guess my main concern is the capacity that the new pool might have is below, regardless of which concept we choose, going to be below what we can do now. I think capacity, the third capacity, I think it's like 600 and something. We're at 707. So what impact do you think that would be for pool usage if we drop their usage down to that number? And I guess would the payback, I guess, be longer or shorter?
Sure, I'll take that. So the first three designs are definitely smaller. We had originally given George some budget numbers to try to hit, and he hit those. For the last 5 to 7 years, we've been kind of targeting this like a $6 million number is who I kept talking to with folks in the industry. And then with inflation and everything else that's happened over the last year, that's gone up crazy. Last time we had a public meeting, I think you made the comment that concrete was up like 40% over the last year or something like that. So our costs have gone up tremendously on that. So that's why we put those three concepts out originally at those different price points to try to look at it. We did hear that pretty much everybody from the community was saying that that's too small, that they'd like to see something closer to what we have now. On an average day last year, we had 1,000 people across the whole season with the amount of numbers of folks that we had with our daily memberships and our membership scan-ins. We average that out, it's 1,000 people a day.
And that's
So-
not all at one time, that's throughout. the
That's
day.
from noon till 8 PM in our normal open hours. So our current pool holds 707 people at any one time in the water. That doesn't include, everybody that's sitting in chairs or at the concession stand or whatever. So I feel there's a little bit of room. The full replacement value, I think Georgia has 604 right now. But we've got some different amenities in there, some more slides and things like that. I think we can safely hit those numbers and be all right, because that's 600 at one moment, and we only have 1,000 people across the whole day. Obviously, first week of June's a little bit busier than the last week of July, so that 1,000 might be 1,200 in June, but I still think there's capacity for that.
And the replacement option is just replacing what we currently have with a few amenities.
Correct. That replacement one is same basic size of water, better amenities. You kind of get a little more bang for your buck. The more slides you put on a tower, right now we just have one slide tower. You're paying for that tower, whether you put one slide on the towers, half the cost or
Sometimes 3/4.
of the cost. So that if you can hang more slides off of it, it's almost a better bang for your buck to put 2 or 3 slides on there than it is one.
Thank you.
Sarah, did you?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just, the capacity thing is interesting to me just because I think of capacity as being the number that can be in the space. And it's not that, it's just in the water. So we know if we have 1,000 people, some of those people don't even get in the water on a given day, right? And so I guess like as a pretty regular pool user during the summer, it never in the water feels particularly crowded, except for those special event days when there's like special things kind of happening in the water, right? So that's where I'm a little curious about on those kind of public feedback sessions. Do you think that was made clear about kind of what like capacity truly means in terms of like, this is the number we would see in the, I'm concerned that people are that worried about the like a slightly lower capacity, I guess.
Yeah, and capacity is an interesting thing when it comes to pools. Usually health codes will base it solely off the square footage of water, but then there's also metrics to account, like Scott was saying, for deck area as well. But one of the things we did get some open-ended comments about was, on the peak days, like this facility is crowded, I can't find shade, or I can't find a table. And so we did have some comments that, spoke to that.
No, and I get that about the seating and the shade. I totally agree that there's like it would be really helpful to have more. I guess what I'm wondering though is if there really is a concern about water capacity, or if that's more just kind of, it feels crowded. Like, I don't know.
We did discuss that at the January meeting when we showed the 3 initial concepts and we gave the capacity numbers. We tried to explain that it is, those capacity numbers are pretty much tied to the body of water and the square footage. There is some basis on type of swimming in there as well. Lap swimming takes up more space than place swimming does, because you're just using maybe 4 people tops in the lane or so. Unless you're competitive, then you put more in there, but people really know how to swim. Well. Me swimming laps, it's me and one other person, and I'm still part every time I go by. So it does feel crowded sometimes when you get in there at 1 o'clock and there's 100 day camp kids in there running
Right.
around and all the families that have come to swim. So it definitely is perception that it can be crowded in there.
And the primary difference between that third concept and just replacement is the kid pool, right? Like the separate third pool.
Correct.
But just to kind of clarify on that third concept, there's still that play structure and space. It's just not separated the same way.
There is more water in the full replacement value
Okay.
than there is in concept 3. There's more square footage of water there.
Okay. No, and I just mean in terms of just amenities, though. It's still kind of there. It's just not separate, right? Like,
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So on the, let me go back to that. Yeah. So we had the play structure is in each of these in the 0 depth entry instead of in a separate pool on its own. So yeah, so it definitely takes up some of that. It takes up a good amount of that 0 depth entry as well.
okay.
So because there was the parents really liked having the smaller for the 6 and under. So that's just incorporated into
Into the larger pool.
the larger pool.
Yes.
On these 3 designs,
On
then
these
there's the full replacement that has another body of water for the toddlers, small kids.
And right now, we've got 8 lanes.
Correct.
So when we were talking about concept 3 versus the replacement, and you're back to adding the independent children's pool, one of the things that was clear that we've discussed a couple times is the desire for shade and additional seating. Did we have to give up expanding that in order to go to the replacement from concept 3?
So I think with the layout of the site that we could definitely just try to maximize the amount of shade, on the periphery. We even had initially talked about, are there ways to expand the boundaries a little bit? Could we put something up could we put a pavilion, up the hill behind the slide tower, and that could accommodate, the 150 campers that might be there. And so they're
Yeah.
kind of in their own separate area, and then that, leaves the rest of the shade available for the general public. So I think that, once we get into the entire site design and site layout, that we can really look at how to maximize that amount of space for shade.
That's great. Would you mind going back to the slide that had the cost recovery on it, please? Thank you.
Yes.
So I want to make sure I understand, because, it's very clear that there are a lot of people in this town who want us to have some sort of indoor option. It is also very clear that asked that question, they weren't asked at what cost, right? So that's what I'm trying to figure out. And I went back and I read the comments today, and really, there's no hint of that because that's not what we asked. And I understand why we didn't ask that, because we were asking about all sorts of different things at once. So I want to make sure I understand correctly, though, from what you said, it sounds like, based on your estimates, that we will then be subsidizing the indoor pool to the tune of about $250,000 a year.
Correct.
And that assumes that we can rent the amount of time and other things that you're expecting based on what else is available. Is that?
Correct. Yes.
That those are projections
Mhm,
as well.
yes.
Okay. And I believe you because you know how many pools there are and okay. Versus, so if we're talking about the replacement or the cost recovery for the replacement pool, what dollar amount are we talking about there? Would you guess?
For the subsidy?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
it's-
what does that 10% mean in actual dollars?
Oh, okay, yeah, so it looks like it's around, $35,000 to $50,000.
Okay.
We'd see it operating very closely to how it currently does.
Okay.
now.
Is
Eh,
it the difference between the expense budget and the revenue projection?
That's correct. So on that the replacement option, it's right about $50,000 total.
Oh, see, there you go. All I should do is look at the lines above it. Thank you, Emily. I was just looking right at the percentage
I like
line.
the percentage. We were looking at opposite things, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And I will say that George's budget numbers are very detailed. He's got quite captured everything in the line items. Our numbers will look maybe a little bit better than that if you're looking at my budgets currently and going forward, because some of the things aren't still in my budgets. So if you're looking at your budget book and you look at the aquatics section, we don't have utilities in there anymore because we centralized all the
Right.
utilities at City Hall to be paid out of City Hall's budget. So some of those things, like right now, I would be above 100% cost recovery, but if we added some of those things back in, we would get closer to this 90% number of the replacement cost that we're sitting at right now.
Okay. The second question related to the indoor pool portion of this is, and I know automatically this would make it cost more, so I understand that, but is there a way to do this so that if we 5 years from now decided we were in a budget place where it made sense for us to invest in this retractable, whatever, oops, excuse me, you're not the only one hitting microphones. Would it be possible to do that at a later date? Okay, so we're not precluding our options if we don't do that right out of the gate.
No, and a lot of times that's just something we would want to be aware of during the design process to make sure that we have the adequate clearances on the deck to be able to drop that structure. Maybe we can even, pre-do the foundations, but yeah, that's definitely something that we have worked on facilities in the past, that we have sectioned off that lap pool so that in the future that they can cover it, if needed.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody locally that has that kind of structure today?
I don't think so. I know that we've Cape Girardeau, actually where Scott's from, they historically have had a bubble over their 50-meter pool. So they, it's an air supported dome, and there are some of those in the area, with like sport, soccer and tennis complexes, you might see them pop up. That would be even a lower cost, but it also comes with a lot of maintenance and operational.
You don't see Scott
headaches,
shaking
yes,
his head
indeed.
behind you. Yeah.
So the air supported structures are probably more common just because they're more cost effective. But I don't think that there is either an open air. The three pictures we showed are Dynadome, open air and sprung structures, but I don't think that there's any of those here within the area.
Thanks.
What would be the lifespan of the new pool?
So we usually say that an outdoor aquatic facility is going to be in that 25 to 35 year range. Essentially, what you all have gotten out of your existing points.
Okay.
And the structure was the same, correct?
Correct.
Other than the panels, the glass panels on the Dynadome, 15 years.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
but if you put that structure on, you're looking at a 25, 30-year lifespan on that as well.
With some of the municipalities around us, at least one I know of, are starting to increase their price for swimming or going to the pool, and they're cutting their hours down, I guess, for expensive. Do you see us expanding or staying where we are?
So the trend is kind of reducing hours. We started that last year with our end of season, when the kids go back to school. Historically, we had always been open all the way up through Labor Day. Even once school started, we'd open up at 4 p.m. in the afternoons once we could get lifeguards back in. Starting last year, we closed, I believe it was 2 weeks early, and we weren't open throughout the week. Once we went back to school, we were only open Friday, Saturday, Sundays. That's kind of going to be the standard this year across the whole region. Everybody's doing that. And even putting an extra week on there. Now it's not the week they go back to school. It's actually the week before they go back to school, because it's so hard to get the lifeguards to come lifeguard. They're ready to start school. They're going to get their books. Their parents want them to go get new shoes or whatever it is, or their sporting activities or after school activities are already starting up for practices and stuff. So that's the standard. I would not like to see us close earlier or open later. I think that noon to 8 is a really good time frame to be able to capture a multitude of different families, be they at home in the summer or they're working and can't get there till 5 o'clock. We don't want to close at 6:30 and then they don't have time to actually get a good swim in. So, but yeah, the costs are going up on your lifeguard services. They're going up tremendously with the minimum wage increases over the last 5 years. We're paying $15.50 for lifeguard services this year. So the costs are going up.
So during the cold weather months, would the hours basically be nights and weekends?
So on an indoor pool, you typically try to open up early in the morning, 5:30, so you can get a lap swim in. That takes a guard. You try to do some water aerobics early mid-morning, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And then you're going to sit idle for most of the day until you can get lap rentals in, swim clubs and swim teams and such coming in the afternoon, 3 to 5 or 6. And then maybe you have a swim lesson from 6 to 8, and then some open swim time. Most of your open swim time is typically going to be weekends, other than lap swim. So there's going to be a good portion of the day where it'll sit empty, because there's nobody that's going to come in that time frame anyways, but also lifeguards are hard to come by. Probably 90% of our lifeguards are high school students, so they're in class, they can't be there.
I know we haven't gotten to that point yet, but any interest you think in university, school district of using a pool all year long?
So we had a focus group in our December meeting where we invited all the schools to attend, and everybody sent a representative over. They're all would be interested in that. Both of the high schools, Nerix Hall and Webster Groves High School had, have swim teams. You're starting water polo teams. PE classes even coming over from Hickson, things of that nature. So they were all interested. They all said they would, be willing to help try to support it. We obviously didn't talk any dollars or numbers or anything. Webster University has a pool, so they weren't quite as gung ho about getting involved in it, but their pool is, it's not a competitive size pool either, so maybe there's a possibility there as well.
Yeah, I thought they would stop using their pool because of the maintenance and all that good stuff, so.
I think my biggest concern is with the indoor is the cost, the ongoing cost. If we decided as a council that we were okay with that, which I'm not saying we are, but like hypothetically, if we were, is there a way that we could kind of go back to the community and say, like, do you want replacement and indoor or both, like either or, like, is there another chance to get community feedback? Or when we put it on the ballot, can we split it into two things? Like, this is to vote to replace it, and this is the vote to add an indoor option. Like, how does that work?
My concern.
Well, can we have Neil answer that question first? Because he looked like he was going to start to.
Yeah, you'd have to be very careful in the language to make it clear that whatever happened would be a consistent outcome. So you don't want to have a vote for nothing. So you'd have to you really would have to make a determination as to what's going to be in there, because theoretically, if you posted it as two questions, you could arguably have the one pass that says indoor, but the other one saying, I don't want to replace it. And then what do you have left?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
again, I think that's tricky language. I think you're going to have to come down to really one question.
Go ahead, Emerson.
Yeah, my concern is that, we do it indoor, will the community be willing to support it from now on? Because that cost will be there then. I guess I'm kind of going back to my school board days. Some of the people wanted free kindergarten, but after they got out of kindergarten, first grade, they could care less. If it was free or not, because their child was in the first grade. I guess the individuals that want the indoor swimming, is that school age kids, that are seniors in our community, will they continue using that indoor pool as long as they can, I guess, is the initial cost, and the ongoing cost will be my concern with the indoor concept.
I think I'm more concerned about the ongoing costs, because I think, we could craft the bond to cover the replacement cost if we needed to. We have to make other choices if we wanted to do that, but the ongoing, like that's not part of the bond issue. And we're not talking about, increasing. So that means, like, I just don't know that we're in a place where we can add $200,000 of cost every year.
Scott, let me ask you one sort of comparative question. This reminds me of the skating rink. The skating rink sits idle a good portion of the time simply because we don't have the kind of people who use it during the day. But the skating rink makes money. Is that right?
Correct.
But part of the reason I think it makes money is that because of the scarcity of ice time, is that we can charge a whole heck of a lot of money for the times that we can rent. And that a lot of those people come from outside of Webster Groves. Do we expect people outside of Webster Groves to come rent time in this pool? Or are we really talking about serving local constituency groups more?
Yeah, you're exactly right on the ice rink. We can charge $250 an hour for that ice rink. And on weekends, we're 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. or 12 a.m., so it's a whole day. I don't know that we're going to see that amount of rental in an indoor pool. There are quite a few swim teams that came out to some of the meetings, or parent reps that are on different swim teams. There is some demand for indoor pool areas, but I don't know that we're going to get $250 an hour to rent the pool for that. And I think I think these numbers are right, that we're going to be, I've got other cities comparison numbers that have indoor pools, both recreational side and a competitive pool, like Kirkwood High School built a few years ago. And nobody's over 80% cost recovery. St.
Okay.
Peter's is the highest one at about 76%. They've got both an indoor leisure pool and Olympic size. They've hosted Olympic swimming trials. So they're huge. They can bring in $40,000 or $50,000 maybe on a weekend rental for a big swim meet. We're not going to be of that size, so we're not going to be able to bring those type of dollars. All the way down to, some cities are in the 30% cost recovery for their indoor pool. So it's,
Not to name names, but I assume those are mostly kind of the recreational pools and not really.
Actually, one of them was Cape Girardeau that has the
Okay.
bubble. They have just a 50-meter pool, old rectangle square body
Yeah.
pool that I grew up in swimming in. And they join in with the school district there. It's actually on school district grounds, but the city owns it and operates it. It's an aging facility with that bubble dome, which is not great air quality when you're inside it. And they're actually involved in doing some renovations to that facility right now. But yeah, they're only at 28% cost recovery for the previous fiscal. So, and then there's lots of things in between there. A lot of the cities don't necessarily break out all of their revenues or all of their costs to just the pool. So it's a little hard to get those numbers. But none of my friends in the industry are breaking even. And if you ask George, I think he'll tell you the same thing. We're not really aware of any indoor pools that break even. They're all going to be subsidized and run under operating deficiency.
So as we look at this last, the indoor aquatic, is that for the freestanding separate facility, not doing what we talked about in terms
That
of?
would be putting the building over the current lap lane and dive tank that's in the outside pool right now. So putting a building over the top of that, so
Yeah.
you can open it up in the summertime and in the
And
winter
then
it's closed
close it
down.
in the winter.
So that fee, that $200,000 loss is
Uh-huh.
for 9 months. It's not even
Okay.
4 years cost.
Okay.
Because the other 3 months would be included in the outlet.
Scott, assuming your budget doesn't increase and you need to recover the $200,000, where do you get it from in your budget?
There's a good question. I hadn't anticipated. I don't have a solid answer for you right now. I don't really know where I'd get 200,000 short of. I mean, really, you're gonna have to try to make it up on fees somewhere. So I think you're gonna have to try to increase fees to make up a healthy portion of that. Some of that could be on the new indoor pool if you go that route. But there's gonna be some spot in there, some sweet spot where if you go above that, people don't sign up. If you go too low, then you're leaving money on the table. So finding that sweet spot of where that is. Other than that, we've cut back pretty hard over the last 3 years since we closed in the original March for COVID. We've never opened up with the full complement of staffing and services that we had prior to that. So we've leaned down quite a bit. I'm not sure where we'd lean out another $200,000 would be pretty tough.
And I the only reason I asked that question is because I think it's helpful for this council to realize that if we do go with the indoor pool, that we're gonna have to find the money someplace else. Or we're gonna have to cut back potentially on
Right.
other services that the Parks and Recs already provides.
I mean, it appears that it would be better to take, start with a lower. Instead of doing, let's say, concept 2 and adding indoor aquatics, it would be better just to go with a replacement concept and just do a better job on an outdoor only facility than medium with the indoor aspect. That's how I'm looking at it.
I agree with you, Pam. And like Laura's question, that replacement concept can be, the infrastructure can be retrofitted. So if we ever want to close it off, we
Yeah.
can down the road.
Yeah.
We have to look at, hopefully it'll be at a 90% payback, but if it's not,
Right.
just don't go.
Yeah.
So you're saying like make the indoor a potential future?
Yeah.
Just make sure we don't build anything that precludes it from being added.
Honestly, I don't think, well, just looking at other municipalities in the area, I don't see anybody really jumping up to replace their pool. So we might have some type of corner on the market, I guess, if we wanted some type of indoor lap swim meets and stuff like that. Everybody comes to Webster Road, but that's, who knows?
Did the replacement one have a separate dive pool? Like the leg?
Correct, yes.
Yes, currently it does, yes.
And that was something that would make putting the indoor structure over it more expensive. So that might be something to think about is do we have that separate dive tank laying leg? Because if we do want to do the indoor in the future, that will make it more expensive.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's priced currently to have
That's
that
correct. Okay.
dive tank on there. If you, George was saying, if you took the dive tank
That'd be
off and just went with the straight 8 lap lanes, you can have diving boards on the end and
Mhm.
still use them for diving for open swim. You close a couple lap lanes down, you dive into those lanes. Then you could shrink that $3.7 million fee down. $500,000 or something.
Yeah, we'd have to
Maybe.
look at the square footages, but yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
But that would eliminate competitive diving?
You couldn't
Just-
do diving and swimming at the same
Right.
time.
Current.
Yeah. So you'd
But that's
have
how it
to-
is. We don't really do them at the same time now, do we?
Yeah, the dive meets are before swim meets, if
Right.
that's what you're thinking
They
about. Yeah.
practice sometimes at the
Okay.
same time, but the meets are not normally held at the same.
Okay.
One other question, the expense budget, is that additional, or not additional, the FTEs we need for maintaining that concepts, whichever one we decide to go with?
So if you, the replacement concept would be roughly the same that we have now as far as FTEs. If you go with any of the concept 1, 2, or 3, that's a little bit smaller pools as you build up. So you'd have less lifeguards needed. So those FTEs would come down on each one of those. I don't have a set amount on each one of those because these are more still kind of concepts. So you had to define those exactly down. The indoor, you'd probably need about 3 FTEs worth of lifeguards to run that indoor facility 9 months out of the year. Last council meeting, we had a conversation about if we didn't contract out our lifeguard services and management. If we took that away, then we'd probably need another 1.5 FTEs for full-time staff to manage the lifeguards and hiring and training and that stuff. And then that would reduce that management service, which would be about a break-even cost on there. So max, you could be up to, almost 5 FTEs more for the indoor, but that's built into those operating costs already. For the lifeguards, not for the full-time if we get rid of the management contract.
Sorry.
So Scott, what do you need? Is this just a check-in, get some feedback from us? And what do you need from us tonight?
It would be great to get a little bit of direction, and I've gotten a little bit from you now. This is still concept plans, but we're gonna be finalizing it and creating a 100-page document that will have all the information that we collected today, and will make a recommendation. It would be great that if my recommendation would be in line with what you guys are thinking now.
All right,
So it'd be helpful to know kind of what you're thinking.
all right, so we're gonna go down the line then. And, no, we're not taking a vote or anything, but your impression, I think right now to give Scott some direction. We won't go down the line because that means that if you're at the end, you always have to start. David, I'm gonna see what you need. I think what I'm hearing is you'd like to know sort of replacement versus something smaller. You'd like to know whether or not indoor is an option. What else would you like us to comment on?
Those are the 3 things I really need. Like, do you want to go stay with the same replacement value size? Or would you be comfortable going down to a smaller one? And then indoor, is it something that you really would like to see us put a full plan together for you now? Or is it something that I'm kind of hearing that don't rule it out, keep it in there as an alternative, and it's something that we can look more into as we go forward, or as budget changes may happen in the future coming years. Those are kind of the 3 things I'd like to get a better handle on.
And again, the replacement is almost like going with what we have.
Yes, ma'am.
So with the separate, because I was still trying to envision with the child's area, how do you with the designs that were up there, how do you separate them from the other kids when that's one of the things that the parents really liked was the 6 and under being separate. So I'm thinking the replacement cost one would have the 3 separate.
Yes.
Pieces like we
And it
have.
was on page 12 of that slide deck, so it's got the smaller
Mhm.
child toddler pool there, same as we had currently.
Cause I actually went up there and looked at that stuff to just try to get a
Yeah.
feel for, okay.
All right. Who wants to weigh in first?
I'll go.
Go. Oh, we will start at the end. Go for it.
I'm leaning toward concept 3 because I'm interested to see, I think I like the idea of less staff. I think that's a big plus. And I think there are ways to kind of manage that to keep the littles kind of separate. And if we do that, I would think we'll probably need a splash pad. It's not my favorite part of the pool, but it's a nice, as a parent, it's a nice spot to let your kids run around. I'm very interested in closing it, the lap pool. I think it's a service that we can provide to the community, and it's also pretty cutting edge, and that's kind of Webster. And when it comes to these kinds of projects, I think we'll see a lot of public support for it because that's all I hear about. Was there a third question? Did I miss the third?
No, I think you covered
Alright.
it. Emerson?
I'm in favor of the replacement option. One of my concerns, as asked earlier, the guest capacity, going down from 700 to anything lower than 600, I think it'll be disastrous for us. Going down to 497, 432, 322, they might as well probably putting their some in their backyard and fill up the water where they go with it. So I do like the idea of the preparing the infrastructure ready for a indoor pool in the future, but like Emily mentioned, just that at that time, before we make that decision, we have to make sure it's going to pay for itself, because that's something above and beyond, probably for not all of our residents, but some of our residents would like it. If we can expand it out to some rentals from the university to high schools and I guess in the general area, it'll be going downhill. We'll be doing the same thing as others, cutting the time, making sure we can save cost. Because it's new, it's going to attract people from all over. You ought to see Webster Grove's new pool. So we're going to be packed for a while, but I think over maybe a year, it'll level out to see what the actual capacity will be. So I'm in favor of the replacement option.
Pam?
I'm in favor of the replacement option. I would say 40% there on later considering the indoor capacity, but it seems like there's no revenue wins with that. So I would think that that's kind of lower priority. I'd rather go with replacement and maybe just completely forget the indoor possibility.
Can I change my mind?
You got to wait to hear everybody and then you can change your mind.
I'm in favor of the full replacement, but I'm also fully in favor of enclosing at this time. I think that our community can support it once I think it meets Webster's needs, even though the cost. But with that said, I would like the community to understand that if we go the full replacement plus the indoor, that there's likely to be cuts in other parts of the Parks and Rec. And I'd like them to understand where we might see where those cuts might come from.
Yeah, I like the idea of the full replacement, and I like the idea of planning it for future addition of the enclosure. My biggest concern there is, again, where do we pull the 200,000? So where do we pull that additional cost from? And in a way that's sustainable and without jeopardizing other services, or, as David said, determining where that's going to come from.
So I like the replacement. I think that's the easy one because it's what we have already and it has the separate pool, which I know is attractive. The ongoing cost of the indoor one is just really a stumbling block for me. If we had like firm buy-in on both the capital outlay and the operating costs from other municipalities, from schools that want to use it and want to help really partner in this above just lane fees, then I would be all for it. But I don't know that that's something that I feel like the city should fully subsidize on our own. I do think it's a great amenity. If we were flush with cash and we had $200,000 a year that we could put in that, I would love to offer that as a service, but I don't really think it's fair to cut other areas in Parks and Rec to add this new thing. And there's no, like, I don't know where I would pull that. You guys are already so lean. I think if the community, meaning like the broader community, wants this, then we're gonna need some help in paying for it. So I would say replacement with, you know, an eye to maybe adding the indoor in the future, and would be more supportive of the indoor if we had some partners.
Do we have another water department to sell?
And so Scott, for me, you know, I sit kind of right between replacement and concept 3 in part because I take Sarah's position that crowded at the pool often is crowded on the pool deck, not crowded in the pool itself. But I do, you know, just as a point of emphasis for me is how do we figure out that out of pool experience, shade, you know, grass. I mean, personally, my kids love to be in the grass. They didn't want anything to do with the concrete other than the one at the bottom of the pool. So, you know, so for me, I'm looking at that replacement, but maybe to just, it may need to be a little smaller so we can accommodate the surface deck. I personally love the idea of having a place where camps can be. And I don't want to say separate from everybody else, but at least, you know, all their stuff is together and it makes it for the family experience is great. And the campers like being together anyway. So it seems Dave Buck's in the room. It seems like a win-win situation to me. So there. So I think that's about as much direction as you could hope for from us.
I appreciate those comments. That does give me really good direction. So.
Well, thank you all very much. Wait, oh no, Emerson may be changing his mind. I forgot to give you that opportunity. Go right
I
ahead.
didn't change my mind. I'm still in favor of the replacement concept, but I would like us to leave a little wiggle room in the replacement. Say if there's another amenity we can add for $20,000 or something like that would make it a better pool. I would like to take that in consideration. 2, if the community is strong, you know, if they want to pass additional tax to pay for the additional enclosure, that revenue be coming in forever and ever. We can look at that. I mean, that's, you know, talking maybe about a $4 million tax over the next few years. Money's coming in, we can pay for it.
But we have no more room to go in our tax assessment for
sales tax.
sales tax, right? Or for individual parks and rec or anything like that. So it'd be a general property tax increase, right? That we would have to go back to citizens for, which is a
That's
tough
right,
sell,
yeah.
I think.
Oh, yeah.
So just so we're clear though, right? We've given you some direction. That doesn't mean that you come back and that replacement is exactly the way it looks on the paper. I don't want anyone in the public to think that we have now fully decided on design of the pool. You all now are going to go work on that for a while.
Yes, and all of these are still concept plans.
Yes.
The master plans are still concept. So anybody that's looking at these in 5 years, don't expect to look at Google Maps and see exactly what we're showing right now. These are concepts. So as we get into the full design phase over the coming years, before the new pool is built, that's when we'll have this is exactly what you're going to get once we go bid it out and build it.
Well, on behalf of all of us, thanks for the work so far, and we look forward to what comes next.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
All right, we have no appointments to boards and commissions. We will take about 5 minutes, maybe a few minutes under 5 minutes, and we will move on. Yeah, 0 minutes? You want 0 minutes?
Basically,
Just a little under 3 minutes.
You
Try,
think it's
go
less
for
than
3
5
minutes.
minutes?
If I say 3 minutes, we'll do 5. So
Oh,
let's
okay.
leave it at that. That we're all here. See? Look at that. 5 minutes. Oh, sorry. Let me point vaguely in that direction. All right. Are we ready to go? All right. Let's call this May 16th council regular meeting of the Webster Grove City Council to order. We're happy to have you with us. We welcome questions, ideas, and comments from anyone in attendance. Members of the audience may comment only when recognized by me. And if you have filled out a comment card over there, please do fill that out and turn it in so I can recognize you. You'll be limited to 3 minutes for your comments. If you are on Zoom and would like to make a comment, we're going to ask you to use the raise your hand function and you'll be recognized as well. We will start with the roll call.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss. Here. Councilmember Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Alexander.
Here.
Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Here.
All right, we have a proclamation today and I will read, whereas Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month is a month to celebrate and pay tribute to the contributions of all Asian Pacific Americans to American history, society, and culture. And whereas the month of May was selected as it honors the immigration of the first Japanese residents of the United States in 1843. Additionally, May also marks the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, constructed by the labor of mostly Japanese immigrants. And whereas on May 1st, 2009, President Obama issued Presidential Proclamation 8369 proclaiming May 2009 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And whereas generations of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders from all backgrounds have been inspirational examples of leaders and trailblazers and have a longstanding history of making esteemed, significant cultural, economic, and community contributions across the United States and the state of Missouri. And whereas a vast diversity of languages, religions, and cultural traditions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders is continuously fostered to strengthen the fabric of American society. Now, therefore, I, Laura Arnold, Mayor of the City of Webster Groves, and the entire City Council do hereby proclaim May 2023 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in the City of Webster Groves, and do hereby recognize the many contributions made by Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the United States, the state of Missouri, and our community. All right, and we will, yay. We're going to send this along to a couple of our residents who made us aware last year of this particular month of recognition and didn't want to miss it. So thank you for that. We will move right to the remarks of community and visitors. I don't have any speaker cards.
Nope.
Do we have anyone who is online who would like to speak? Please use that raise your hand function.
No.
This marks a first in my tenure as mayor. There is not a single public comment at all. I may take that slightly personally. I don't know if I should. All right, let's move on to new business. Does anyone have new business they'd like to add to the agenda? All right, hearing none, we're going to go to unfinished business. And Councilwoman Hickson Shepherd, could you ask for the third reading of bill number 9225?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third reading and adoption of bill number 9225.
Second.
Bill 9225, final reading. An ordinance levying a 3% sales tax on the sale of legal adult use marijuana in the city of Webster Groves, Missouri.
Is there any discussion?
Just question, clarification. So is it determined then that these 3%, these all are cumulative? So you've got the state, you got the county, you got the municipality, you would have 9% sales tax.
Arguably, everybody has their own, and so they would all be tallied up.
But it is still subject to litigation,
Yes.
correct? Yeah, okay. Any other questions or discussion?
Missouri's is really cheap right now statewide. People from Illinois are coming over here now to get their edibles and everything.
All right, let's have the vote.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. All right, we will move to new business and we will start with the appointment of the municipal judge. Council members received a memo from me that showed kind of a preliminary ranking from other council members. And I will just say, generally, I think I speak for everyone. And I say we were really fortunate to have an excellent pool of candidates. I want to say thank you to the subcommittee members, Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Alexander, Councilmember Hicks and Shepherd for going through all the applications and leading the interview process. And, you know, there seems to be, there's not unanimity, but there's some consensus. And so would anyone like to talk a little bit about who they would like to see as municipal judge, or do we want to go ahead and have a motion for a particular candidate?
Well, I'll speak, my selection was Jim Larrett's. I believe he interviewed very well, like his demeanor, his background, his services, and his experience will give him the back to help the citizens of Webster Groves. What I liked him best, he had that personal human touch. He was looking at the individual, their circumstances to make sure he make fair and equitable decisions. So that's what led me to him.
Right. Other comments from anyone? Just so the public knows, it's a public document. So if you'd like to see the ranking of the top 3 candidates, you certainly can do that. 7 of the 9 members of the council ranked Mr. Larrett's first, and then 2 of us ranked Mr. Nolan first. And so I think probably at this point, unless you all want to discuss it further, I would entertain a motion for appointment.
Mayor, I'd like to make the motion that Jim Larrett's become our next municipal judge of the city of
Second.
Webster Groves.
We second that.
Right. Is there further discussion? All right, we'll vote on that, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
All right, as you go,
Sorry, I was
Yeah,
just gonna
please.
ask, in regard to our provisional judge now, do we continue with the same provisional judge?
You can. I don't know. I haven't looked at the appointment on the provisional, but typically we appoint a judge for a period of time. And during that time period, you don't replace them. They serve a term, as it were. Let me find out what that term is on the provisional, because I don't know the answer to that.
Understood.
But
Thank you.
if the time is expired, then you could change or you could renew it, up to you. So
I just
And it-
wondered, yeah.
and at this point, he has agreed to continue
Okay.
as provisional judge. All right, number 2 in new business designation of acting deputy city clerk. You all saw the memo from Katie. Katie seems to be here all the time, but just in case Katie is not, we need someone who can officially accept documents as the city clerk and do a few other things while we're in the process of hiring a new deputy city clerk. City manager has suggested Jenny Starkey. Katie also agrees to that. So I believe I need a motion to designate Jenny Starkey as the acting
Does
deputies.
Jenny agree with
I was
it?
like, can we ask her what she feels about it?
No, she doesn't. I don't think she has a choice.
Nah,
called a
I'll make
draft.
motion.
We pay her salary, folks. Remember that.
I'll make a motion to name Jenny Starkey as the acting deputy city clerk.
Second.
Discussion?
Good luck.
I just want to double check that the search for the new deputy city clerk is a part-time position.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Any other discussion? Okay, I think we're ready to vote.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
All right, moving right along again. Number 3 on our agenda here is to set the public hearing date for our 2024 fiscal year proposed budget, which we plan to hold on June 6, 2023, 7:30 here in council chambers and via Zoom. I assume I need a motion to set that date.
Yes. Madam Mayor, I'd like to move to set the public hearing date for fiscal year 2024 proposed budget for June 6, 2023 at 7:30 PM via council chambers and Zoom.
Second.
Any discussion? Let's vote on that.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilwoman Alexander, would you call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9226, please?
Yes, I would like to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9226.
Second.
Bill 9226, first reading. An ordinance of the city of Webster Groves authorizing the city manager to execute a contract for refuse, recycling, and yard waste collection services with Waste Management of Missouri, Inc.
Is there any discussion? Have the second reading, please.
Bill 9226, second reading. An ordinance of the city of Webster Groves authorizing the city manager to execute a contract for refuse, recycling, and yard waste collection services with Waste Management of Missouri, Inc.
Right, thank you. We'll now move on to consideration of our FY 2024 budget and the amendments. So just for council's sake, I've talked to the city manager, the assistant city manager, and our plan tonight is to first go through the plan and proposals of city management. Ask questions if you need to understand things, but let's not debate the actual amendments at this point, so we can all see the big picture. And then we will go back and revisit the amendments one at a time. Everybody good with that? All right, Mr. Peterson, the floor is yours,
Thank you,
or city manager. I'm not sure who's starting.
I think I
Go
am.
ahead.
So one of the nights I get to go first, so. Thank you, Ms. Starkey, for pulling that up, and folks at home again, thank you all. Eric Peterson, Assistant City Manager, Director of Finance and Administration. For those at the dais, you have been inundated with paper. For those at home, you can follow along all the paper that I've laid out in front of me and given to the council at webstergrovesmo.gov/budget for all the things we're going to talk about tonight. Our agenda for discussion tonight between the city manager and I are again to just give you a quick review of the bottom line numbers of the budget. So where we're at on the budget numbers and all funds and general fund, that's effect on the 5-year plan for the city. Reviewing the manager's recommendations, sort of those final recommendations coming out of our small group meetings with each of you. And then other scenarios that you did request, some things that we looked at, we put some numbers behind them. Review of the amendments that have been submitted and such. Again, not the individual review, just sort of a overview of them. And then we will have the ability to talk about some of those scenarios and recommendations. And I built the tool so we can, if you do adopt a recommendation, see what it does to the deficit or add to spending and such like that in the 5-year plan. So again, the bottom line numbers, I want to just highlight again, the great work of our city team overall in this budget year. This is all funds, and obviously we are well below last year's expenditures because we had not programmed in ARP spending this year as we did last year. But the all funds budget is in surplus by $937,000, so just under $1 million in surplus in the all funds budget. That is, of course, if you make any changes to the general fund or other things, that may change, but as it sits right now. And then we want to point out really some great work as well in the general fund. We do have a deficit that remains of $397,501. If you remember at this point last year, we were talking about a deficit that ranged from 1.5 to 1.8 million, depending on how we work the general fund. That is an incredible effort that the city has gone through, and you as leaders should be commended, in my opinion, as well as taking us through some of that time. And then we've also been fortuitous that we've had some great insurance and legal settlements that have gone our way this year and added a load of one-time money that have pushed us into surplus for 23. Now that surplus would not have been possible without one-time money, but also without the other hard decisions that we did make in relation to the deficit earlier this year in 2023.
And because it's a surplus, doesn't mean that we have a balanced budget.
That's correct. It does not. That the balanced budget is built on that recurring revenue. So we take out that concept of what are those settlements and such from the calculations.
Eric, just in case somebody is watching this and they see the slide before this, if you go back one slide.
Yep.
And you've got a proposed budget surplus with all funds.
Yep.
Go forward, we've got a deficit in the general fund. Just briefly explain why that, though, but
Sure.
how can both be true?
Both can be true. So there are 14 funds that comprise the budget of the city. So the general fund is the largest and it is the discretionary fund and it has the most revenue sources and such. But to give you a great example of where much of that surplus is being found this year is in the stormwater fund. There's no major expenses this year scheduled out of the stormwater fund. So that sales tax is coming in. We have planned projects for culvert work and other things that are going to be used out of that stormwater fund. But it happens to be a year when the expenses are very low while the revenue is maintained. So that helps create that sense, that surplus that you're seeing in all funds. The general fund is when we've talked about the city's deficit, has really been the area where we talk about deficit concern and how do we get to sustainability where we have revenues matching expenses.
Thank you very much for that.
How does this affect our 5-year plan? We have updated this and I've given you all a copy of the 5-year plan that you can see. I just want to point out, if you all remember, the red line is expenses, the green line is our revenue. This blue line is passed with when we had the public safety sales tax transfer. Here was our deficit target. And here is where deficit in 23, where we got to deficit reduction. So I know this is a type, but you can see there's our little surplus in 23 going right there, the revenue coming in just over the edge of the, because of that one-time revenue over the top of the expenses. But if you remember, the yawning difference between revenue and expenses as we got farther out was much wider than this. The ultimate reality is because of revenue growth, namely use tax and a strong sales tax, despite all the inflationary pressures, our averages are performing better. And in fact, this is our first 5-year plan where revenues average growth now has finally exceeded expenditure average growth. So that has helped to move that delta greatly together. That's great news for the city, but as you can see, we're still not out of it yet. We still, despite that growth potential, and without adding other revenue streams, have a difference in a delta between that. And I will point out for everyone at home, this is our deficit of $397,000. But if you take that out to 29, 5 years out, we're down to a $1.1 million deficit at that point on that average growth scale. That is an incredible, again, achievement from where we were when we started looking at our 5-year plan and how our past practices and our conditions here are affected by our revenue and our expenditures. We'll obviously keep updating this as we go through the process, but to give you a sense again, we have just under $400,000 deficit to balance this budget. We have some recommendations and ideas on that. But again, that is an incredible change to the good that we're seeing going farther out. Now, I will also give you the caution point for all of us to think about is if recessions do come, we are very sales tax dependent. The sales tax will likely be one of our first indicators of, are we seeing consumer spending pullback and other things? And we'll spend this year being very careful watching that because it could be volatile and that could need us to come back and reassess where our budget situation will be. Go forward here. And I believe the next is manager's recommendation. So I'll run the slides and let Dr. Peoples run through her recommendations for you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Thank goodness we got the furniture fixed. Okay, so as Mr. Peterson said, we had all of our small group meetings, so there shouldn't be any surprises within the recommendations. They're really a culmination of the conversations as well as some of the information from Balancing Act. So as Mr. Peterson said, our deficit reduction for FY23, it is much better than what it was looking like before. We will actually end up with the surplus. You may remember that last year council enacted the deficit reduction policy for FY23, which was needed at that time. I do recommend at this point in time that we eliminate that deficit reduction for FY23. So in short, we've made really good progress. Doing further reductions in FY23 would be very difficult with the few months that we have left, and it's not really needed considering the projection that we're on. Compensation in the budget, there's a built-in 4% COLA for general employees. Many of you asked for different scenarios. Mr. Peterson will run through those in some other slides. Keep in mind the 4% is already built in. So anything above that would be an additional cost. Anything below the 4%, there would be money left on the table. The pension fund, I am recommending that fund be renamed. It is currently called the Police and Fire Pension Fund. However, general employees are also included. So Now, I don't want anybody in terms of listening or hearing that police and fire, there's nothing changing in terms of the pension. It really would be changing the name and amending the ratio of general fund contribution. So Mr. Peterson will talk about that in some additional slides. And then moving the comprehensive plan. We talked about that quite a bit in the last budget presentation. Currently, that $150,000, should council decide to move forward with it, is built into the general fund. I would recommend that we use some one-time dollars to fund that rather than having it be in the general fund. I'm recommending that a special initiatives fund be created. So opening a new special initiatives fund for FY24 and beyond to help fund some of the strategic goals of the city that are not currently covered by the general fund. That could align with the, as I said, strategic plan and other, things that come up as the city moves forward. Creating a sustainability program, $100,000, a business development program, $50,000 in the special initiatives fund, and setting aside funding in the reserve appropriation for potential buyouts of flood properties. I am recommending that, should council do that, that these funds be seeded with the remaining ARP dollars. And then in terms, Mr. Peterson, sorry, if you go back.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. The potential buyout of flood properties, the $500,000, certainly don't have to make a decision tonight. We haven't received additional information from FEMA/SEMA on the repetitive properties or the substantially damaged properties. That conversation is still hanging out there in terms of, if they are approved from FEMA/SEMA, would this council want to do that? Just to prepare for that conversation, I do recommend that that $500,000 be set aside. Thank you, Mr. Peterson.
Dr. Peoples, if I could.
Yes, sir.
In regards to the special initiatives funds, do you envision the additional employees to run those programs and manage that fund, or how will that be effectuated?
So the fund doesn't have anything to do with additional employees. So thank you, Councilman Franklin. It really is setting it aside outside of general fund and making sure that we have the dollars to run those programs. Now, depending on the programs that council decides to fund out of those, there may be conversations of additional employees, but right now this is just simply setting aside those funds.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. DEI funding, diversity, equity, inclusion funding. I am recommending that there's also a special fund initiatives fund for that as well. And as we talked about in our small group funding, if council has prioritized DEI within strategic plan, it's something that's at the heart of how we're moving forward. And in order to do that, we're going to have to fund it. So I would recommend doing that. And then the large capital asset.
Before you, go ahead.
That one's popular. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, in terms of the DEI funding, in terms of the Business Development Commission and the Sustainability Commission, in some ways, this is money that we last year said we wanted for these initiatives that we didn't end up spending. I mean, I think in many of those cases, we've moved a long way in figuring out how to spend it. We just haven't actually done that. So this is not an additional amount of money for each of these things. It's preserving the decision-making from this fiscal year.
It is thank you, Madam Mayor. It is preserving that decision-making. FY23 was really a year of planning. Boards and commission staff, we've really put forth those plans, council working on the strategic plan. So it does preserve those funds, and probably not a popular term, but it rolls them over, if you will.
And then $50,000 is nowhere close to what we need to try to bring DEI into this city government or the community. That's just not enough. So we're just starting with baby steps.
That's correct, Councilman Smith. It provides that seating.
And did I understand you to say that those things would be funded by the ARPA funds? Or we're talking about something different.
So Mr. Peterson's going to explain that a little bit further, but as council has received a couple of memos that we do need to allocate the ARPA funds. And so this would help allocate those ARPA funds.
That was my name.
Oh, thank you. Large capital asset reserve program. I am recommending $300,000 to seed that. Earlier in FY23 that was created, and that was really to prepare for the large apparatus purchases in the future and to start funding and having that rather than having it hit the capital fund all at once.
That would include like major AC units and roofing, all that kind of stuff.
You had passed a policy that is built for expenditures of $300,000 or more.
Okay.
So the AC units, we build them in now into their capital asset managers. They should be on a plan. We know when they come up. But this is along that plan, when you have $1 million fire truck and you have a $2 million revenue source, now that's half the plan, right?
Mm.
So how do you build a reserve that is growing over time to limit the impact on the other smaller capital purchases that need to happen in that fiscal year?
Gotcha.
And is this a reserve we should add to periodically?
So I would say yes, based on the recommendation, especially if it's going to be for that large capital asset program.
And because we went back and looked at the age of those large capital assets, and I'll mention one, is the elevator. Everybody remember the elevator went out, it was what, over $100,000?
It was expensive.
Yeah, it was expensive when we didn't really have the money for it,
Mhm.
so.
Well, and those things, we are managing our assets and our infrastructure much better, but those things are going to happen. Something is going to break and then we're going to have to fund it.
I would just add, Councilman Smith, real quick on that. We do, by the policy you passed earlier in the capital improvement policy. So what we don't spend out of appropriations in the capital fund. So if you spend your budget $1 million of capital work and we don't spend 100,000 of it, half of what is unexpensed or unused appropriated funds in the capital fund roll into the reserve. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I think this goes to the comp scenarios.
All right. Compensation scenarios that you have talked about and we all have talked about. Again, there are 8 scenarios here. I want to highlight, and they're written on the sheets that you have in front of you. Scenarios 1 to 3 are base building. And what do we mean by base building? Meaning if you were to give a COLA this year, that would be built into the salary of an employee. Next year, it would obviously be a compounding COLA over the next many years. 4 through 8 are one-time potential compensation issues that we talked about, meaning that they would not affect the next year's targets for any spending or any of our deficit look and such. First one is obviously the 4% COLA. This is all for general government employees. I want to be very clear. Police and fire under their collective bargaining agreements and the compensation package as approved by the Council for Fire are already addressed in the budget. But for the 61 general employees, scenario 1 is the 4% COLA built in the budget. The 5% COLA scenario 2 would take another $38,000, a little closer to 39, well, 38.5, I guess, of spending in the general fund. A 7% COLA we were asked to look at is about 115,000 over this year, and then obviously builds into the base for the coming years. 4 through 7 are different levels of stipend, $500, $1,000, $1,500, and $2,000 stipend, a one-time stipend payment for a general government employee. You can see the 500 is about 32,000, 64 for $1,000, 97 for 1,500, and 129,000 for a $2,000 stipend. And then we were asked to look at the employee medical insurance increase. So medical plans went up 4% in cost this year. So if we were to cover that 4% increase that employees have on their side of that ledger, that would be about $14,000 needed to cover that, to eat that 4%, to move that into the city cost rather than the employee cost. So those are the scenarios we asked for. Obviously, if there's a different model that you want at some point through this process, we can build it and such. Any questions on those comp scenarios?
Do we need discussion on this now? Or?
No, we're going to come back to, so there is not an official amendment right now because the recommendation is to stick with the budget as presented. So how about if we, at the moment, pretend there might be an amendment? And we'll just put that in the queue to discuss, because I know that there are things that want to be discussed, but let's get through the big picture first.
And I think when we get to that modeling and have that tool, that's a great time to have the discussion. So if you all want to know what's
Yeah,
that
there
really
we
look
go.
like, we can
Thank you.
do it live in real time. So there was a couple other scenarios you asked us and we talked about in our conversations together. One is, capitalization of the computer software and hardware. So using that, the capital fund, we have identified up to $387,620 of computer software and hardware that is in the general fund that could be moved to the capital fund. So we don't have an amendment for you tonight. There's some details on the sheet that you have, this sheet here, the big sheet. If you look to the backside, you can see some of those names. But that is a conversation. If you want to use that or make that kind of move, you know, that's an up to amount there, right? So as we can pick an amount and capitalize those costs and some of those programs. Then also we have, as we talked about this,
Benefit of that.
so there is, it's a great question. In one way, people would say, well, you're just moving the cost from this side to this side. The capital funds and the capital sales tax was built 50 years ago when a capital asset, when our jobs didn't have computers, right? And so rightfully, Missouri put computer software in that model. But our jobs required typewriters, file cabinets, you know, desks, all these physical, tangible assets. The workplace is now becoming virtual, right? We don't buy much computer hardware other than the actual computers now. Software as a service is becoming the thing we use. Accounting systems are no longer files and ledger books and things like that. It's a software as a service out of the cloud. And it is a paradigm shift that we're all dealing with. And what is much of our basic business processes and infrastructure that has normally been back in the capital world, back when those taxes were contemplated and created, is now moving to a virtual world. And should we move with that in some way in doing so? And I'm not saying all the computer software. In fact, that number doesn't include small programs. So Canva, that Ms. Starkey uses to do some of our designing, Hootsuite and social media. We didn't put that. These are really, that number represents the Microsoft program and the cloud world. Tyler, our big ERP citywide system, Magnet for permitting and licensing, the HR system. So those very central enterprise-wide type of systems is in that number. It is, again, it's an option. We do not have to do it, but we wanted to provide you options as we look at general fund pressures and think about the wider uses of other funds as well.
Capital fund though would limit our ability to spend money on other capital projects, correct?
It would only as much as the capital fund. The capital fund is about a $2 million fund balance right now. And we are generally appropriating pretty close to what we take in as revenue. But that said, as if we go forward into other issues with the pool bond and if the capital fund is relieved of pressure, we could look at that as well.
But if we put it in the capital fund,
Mhm.
we can still designate it as this?
Absolutely. So the capital improvement sales tax, which funds the capital fund, and this is the key point, the state legislature in passing that statute said that computer software and hardware, normally software is not a tangible asset that you can hang on to, right? We don't get software on disks anymore and all that kind of stuff. But that is allowable as an expense that you can put against that revenue stream in the capital fund. It is not a capital asset for accounting. When we book our capital assets on our balance sheet, we don't count, software as an asset in that regard, but it is a capital expense authorized by the tax enabling legislation.
So would it free up in the general fund then, 387,000?
Absolutely. If you move that whole amount over. And again, we can look at that number, that's a big number. And I gave you the sort of the widest number there we could go to, but we could pull half of that. And when we get to the bottom line of some of these recommendations and the changes, you could see where you could balance using that function.
The only thing I think of is I can see that the software and everything could end up eating up the whole capital fund on a yearly basis. Maybe not a yearly basis, but it could start eating up a good chunk.
It can eat up a portion, yes.
Yeah.
And it's, if you go back to buying furniture and physical assets, that's obviously part of that. So it is a definite choice. It is a choice to be made. So
that's not just for computer software and hardware, it's for office related.
that 387 is just computer software, actually. That doesn't even include hardware because we already have the hardware computers in the capital fund. This is software that is eligible under the capital expense laws. So again, mostly our ERP system, New World, that creates the financial information you see in all of our background cloud and server apparatus and software systems.
Is Tyler the same as New World?
Yeah, sorry. So New World is the specific name. Tyler is the overall name of the company. Another scenario that we did talk about was some special initiatives as we talked about this fund, and Dr. Peoples did a great job explaining it. The conversation to have tonight, and we do have amendments prepared, is the ARP fund. We obviously need to allocate, and rather than continuing an ARP fund, what we are recommending is we take the entirety of the remaining ARP dollars and move them to the general fund as revenue loss. It's completely allowable under the federal law. So that would move to the general fund. And then from that extra fund balance, that, $1.4 million that we've added to the general fund balance, then create a new special initiatives fund out of that. And so that money moves over there. We pull out some to go to special initiatives, and that fund then would be one fund, not many, but have programs. So just like you see in the general fund, there's the Parks Ice Arena program and such. There'll be a sustainability program. There'll be a business development program, so that folks can easily see on these initiatives that we're undertaking, here's the budget, here's what we spent this year as we do our budget reports on each of those program items. Now, it is not a revenue producing fund. So that is, it's one of our funds where there's not a revenue source tied to it. So in the future, if those funds are all expended, we would have to come back to another fund to provide funding for it, which is fine. It's easily done. But I just want to make you aware, that's why we suggest, in the total transfer, having that 100,000 as a future year seeding in the fund balance. You can say no, and we just keep that 100,000 in the general fund. It's totally up to you. But in the future, obviously, we're going to be coming back to some fund if those funds are totally used on where to pull that money from. We did receive 3 amendments from the members that will be addressed tonight. I believe we'll get to those tonight. The purchase of police pistols and the capital fund, accelerating that purchase. And then the sustainability funding, that's one short name for, I think, 4 items in that amendment. In the special initiatives fund is where we have planned it with the amendment writing, and then the stormwater management plan funding as well. So those 3 out of the 11 that we have in front of you are from members of the council. And then the other 7 are all related to the recommendations, should you wish to adopt them, that we put together.
Eric, if I could, I'm sorry to backtrack.
That's
here.
okay.
I'm interested in this, and just looking at the numbers here in regards to the
Software?
capitalized software.
Sure.
What's the IT 226 number?
So yeah, there was a lot of them in there. And so that is mostly going to be the Microsoft deployment, and then all the software that runs the network firewalls and the security firewalls and such. So these enterprise-wide cybersecurity functions that are across the city.
So that's not IT personnel.
No,
That's
none of
just-
these are personnel
Okay.
and those amounts. And I did want to add, I want to, since we're specifics on this, the finance portion there, we don't pay $100,000 for the finance side of Tyler now. As I noted in the note there, we are not hosted with the Tyler New World financial, well, any of the Tyler system. So we're an on-premises server, which prevents us from being able to get to some of the user experience that we want people to do online payments in a seamless fashion. So I included a funding portion, if we're going to do this model, to go to hosted, but it is an ongoing cost. So I wanted to give you a better sense of, it just costs more to be up in the cloud, but it is the beneficial way to go. And ultimately would be our recommendation. At some point, we will have to take that step.
So that would permit citizens to pay for their permits more easily online.
That's correct. So right now we have disjointed systems. So if you're online, okay, I can do a permit in Magnet, but now I have to remember how much I need to pay and such and go over here and type all that in again. It's not like Amazon where your cart just moves with you and it knows what you put in and such. And user experience is important. And hate to say it, and a poor online experience is going to turn people off of using online. And I think we all have we've seen a strategic and tactical goal to really amplify that work. We do have, just wanted to highlight you, there's some technical amendments we'll bring on the 6th. One, and this came up as we talked with auditors on last year's budget. We do a large amount of refunds. So a building permit, someone gets a refund on a building permit, tree permit refunds and such. For as long as we can tell in our accounting system, those have all been done as negative revenue items, meaning that the revenue account is simply debited for that refund. That is technically allowable, but it is an expenditure of the city. And so we want to create expense accounts with our estimate in that expense account. And then that same amount that we expect to pay out would actually increase the revenue. So it's a zero change in terms of the bottom line of the budget. So I'll give you an example. The building permits, we expect, I think it's 4,000 is our rough estimate right now that we remit back to people. So we would we'd create a new expense account to pay those refunds out of, but the revenue would also go up by that same amount, meaning that there's no ultimate bottom line change to the general fund. These exist all across the way. Director Davis and I will have to go through some Parks and Rec refund things to figure out those accounts. We'll have to talk to directors. I don't want to just create some accounts without knowing what their best way to use it is and how they prefer to track those things. So hence why we're waiting till the 6th with that. Number 2, we have some amendments for the grant fund just to make sure that our grant fund numbers align up with our grant expectations. What are we applying for? So we don't have to come back for minor amendments on grants. And then we do have, number 3 is really not an amendment, but we have $66,000 in the public safety sales tax fund. That's fund balance left over there. By your direction already, that fund is closed. And so now that we're all done with 23 and all those numbers are post audit, we will move that money into the general fund. That will change the fund balance in the general fund. So we'll provide you a reestimate of fund balances on the 6th. So I need to move this so you can all see this because it's very important. As we balance the budget and talk tonight, we have a budget of $397,501 deficit. If you adopt the manager's recommendations, which there are 2 of them, the pension change, which I can explain when we get into the modeling if you have questions, and then also moving the comprehensive plan out of the general fund, that deficit will improve to negative $161,000. So that is less than 1/10 of what our budget deficit was last year. And so great improvement there. And again, to balance that 161, you can use a scenario, Councilmember Franklin, like you're talking about with the capitalizing software. You can reduce other expenditures. We can simply say we're going to use the fund balance. It's $160,000. Or you can say we'll move some money from other funds and cover it in that way. So that's a big change. And if you do adopt those recommendations, and we are going to pull up the modeling for you so that you can see, you can take the PowerPoint down and then we'll go ahead.
To the last
Sorry.
slide, please.
You go back right there. Okay. Oop.
I just want to see the methods. Reduce balancing methods.
Yeah.
Reduce
So
expenses.
reduce expenditures, you can increase revenues. So we can reestimate revenues if you want to go through that route. We can take revenues from other funds or move costs to other funds, or we utilize our fund balance, essentially the savings we have on hand, one-time savings to make up that deficit.
Was using ARPA funds an option for that, or is that done in another way?
So we did that last year with ARPA funds. We made a transfer, a revenue loss of $770,000. You can put it up, Jenny. Thank you. That $770,000 was moved in there as a revenue loss item. With the conversation and the recommendation we're having, the ARPA funds would wholly be moved to the general fund balance, but they wouldn't be budgeted as part of that. So we have that opportunity of just be coming out of the general fund, not of the ARP fund.
Okay,
So
because we moved it to the.
Exactly.
general fund so that we had it
Yes.
designated. So-
essentially, if we follow the recommendation, come June 30th, we will close the ARP fund pending the audit, and finishing up all those transactions, and all those funds would be in the general fund.
There'd be no issue then with clawback.
Right.
That's correct. We would claim them all as revenue loss, and in our reports of the county, the federal government, we've already said that. But again, given some of the conversations, including from the White House about utilizing the clawback, it is, I think, in our prudent best interest to move to that.
Mhm.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm going to just real quick, this is our modeling scenario. I know that the words are a little small there, but I'm going to try to give you all the, is this in the, that's not the app version. I'll get it up here. So if that pops up, Jenny, on your screen, you can move it over. This is a modeling version, so we can answer some yes, no questions and then see how the deficit changes and such like that. So. Oh, sorry. We'll do it this way. That's fine.
Okay.
We'll do it this way. So I'm going to try to change my Zoom settings here. So we have the scenarios listed here, and I'll give you a sense. So if you wanted to do that 7% COLA, Jenny, can I have the keyboard? Just type in a yes for me in that box, the Y. Where 7% is? 7%.
7%.
They're at 4%. So now you can see how the budget increased there in 24, the deficit. Did you see the red line move up?
Do it again.
Do it again, Jenny.
Look to you. Oh, no. Yes or no?
If you're trying to get us to rescind the deputy city clerk.
So,
Not gonna work.
so I just want to give you a sense, as you want to look at these models, we can. Jenny, if you can, so let's take that 7% off and make it an N again. And then please go down to the comprehensive plan and change that one to a Y. And then the pension, change that to a Y. So this is the manager's recommendation, and you can see how we have gone, we've reduced that deficit and come together there in that point between those two numbers.
Shouldn't the 4% be yes then?
Sorry, yes, make that a yes, Jenny. There you go. So the 4% is built in, so it wouldn't change in the,
I got it.
so that one's really irrelevant. I just put it
Okay,
there. So
I get it.
the rest of these, so if you wanted to do any of this, look at this and add a stipend, we can do that. If you want to look at, if you could, Jenny, just let's put a Y in the capitalized software and hardware to give, this is the full 387,000 you asked about, council member. If you do that, you can see how much you have created a surplus this year, and you have gotten to an immaterial difference in the deficit and surplus going
Yeah,
forward.
this then for capital.
Right, so on the capital side, again, if you're gonna do the 387, I wouldn't do it tonight. We would want to look at that and then really have that conversation with you about what does the pool bond look like in terms of other capital projects and that potential. Because if we're not going to touch the bond election with other capital things in the park system, that would change that full amount of what we should capitalize out of software.
Gotcha.
But you could take half that 387, a third of it to a half of it, and not compromise the integrity of the capital fund. And even if you just said for 3 years, we're going to do this to help get us through this time, you would see some savings across that time.
That's encouraging.
So this exists, folks. I don't want to tell you what to do. I can explain any of these scenarios. I think this is a time for your questions and also conversations if you have them about all these different things. This is again for the general fund. There's a lot of special initiative, the flood buyouts, things like that, that aren't in this model, but I can address any of the questions you have.
Emerson, you wanted to discuss some of the salary scenarios. So do you want to chime in here? You have a microphone, though. You're going to have to turn around and look at. Thank you.
Well, yes, I think initially I wanted to make sure something was built into the budget for our other staff, that personnel. And I think the 4% is a great number to start with. I believe I asked to see if we soaked up the medical insurance scenario for staff this year. I think there was, what was that increase of 3%?
$14,000.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's 14,000.
and it represents what to the staff, 3%?
That's the staff and the city both got a 4% increase in our costs.
So I guess you can almost say that it's 8% that we're giving back to staff.
No,
No, that's
Well,
not the same.
it's
No.
4% of just their health
Yeah,
costs.
of the health costs, yes. So I'm just saying it's giving something back to them.
Is that in terms of, you're not talking, are you talking about in terms of adding it to the salary itself, or is this a stipend to cover the difference?
How would you
So
handle?
So
we take the cost of the there's a ratio, right? So for
Yep.
every of the 4 plans. And then, so that ratio is built in. What Councilmember Smith is talking about here, that 4% increase, the ratio would be adjusted so that the employee cost for their healthcare plan, family, employee, child, employee, spouse, or single would stay the same. But the difference that they would have paid is moved over to the city cost.
Gotcha.
So it's not a
Okay.
salary, it's in our health insurance cost that we
Gotcha.
remit to the insurer.
And also, I think I'm in favor of some type of stipend.
Mr. Peterson, can
Yes.
you go back to this the COLA scenarios that you had up there, please.
Sure. Do you want to go that or do you have it in front, you have it in front of him in paper? So that way Jenny's not flipping all.
Yeah, we do have the paper.
Yeah.
So you do have it in paper and you can see the total cost there for that as well. Again, stipends, council member, if you want to look at that, 4 through 7 differing amounts there. Those are one-time costs. We would not assume that the next year's budget would have that stipend included.
And number 8, like the medical insurance, that benefits not all employees, right? Because not all employees take
Correct.
insurance.
That's correct. So not all employees do take the insurance, so that, and then also there are differing ratios within that. As a single coverage employee, my increase is $2. So that's what you're covering for me. Whereas a family person would greatly benefit from that because their increase is $4 on $800, 4% on $800. So I'm not trying to in any way change Councilmember Franklin's mind, but if you want to cover the employee cost, a stipend is a much more easy way to implement that for the city. Here's a one-time stipend rather than trying to.
Well, and I don't want to necessarily penalize people. I mean, it also seems to me to be a little more equitable than simply covering the difference in cost. It doesn't matter whether there are other options, insurance available to your family. It doesn't matter how many people are covered. It's the stipend is the stipend.
And I guess if I'm looking at, so I actually look at covering the increase of the medical separate from the stipends here. I mean, I like the idea of covering the increase of the medical, just so that that's a year that they don't have to deal with that. I mean, recognizing that some employees don't have that expense because they've chosen to take care of their medical in other ways. I just don't even think that's something we address. We're just addressing with that the real cost that's here to those who have it and eliminating that for this year. But the stipends, I think, are separate. And I like the idea of something in terms of a stipend separately. And again, because we've gone, 3 years with a 2%?
2% has been our standard
COLA.
COLA over
Yeah.
the years. So it's been,
Right. So, I mean, I actually like the idea of the, at least starting with the 4% COLA and then looking at one of those stipends. And covering that cost of the insurance, the medical insurance.
Can I weigh in on that
Please.
too? I guess I'd rather see a 5% increase than doing the medical, because I feel like then it's going across the board. And just give a little extra to kind of cover the inflation piece, and because it's been so long since there's been a significant COLA. But I'm also in favor of stipend in addition.
Yeah, it seems like we can pay for this too by just moving the IT or the software over into the capital.
I think you certainly, if you adopt the recommendations, your fund balance in the general fund is improved. You could move a portion of the capitalizing to help balance the budget. And then between that and whatever, I mean, you're getting to a small amount of a deficit to balance out there that I don't want to say it's immaterial, it's all material, but the point is it's a small amount of fund balance to have to use if you want to do it that way. And there's still, then this whole plan leaves 150,000 of what was ARP in the general fund balance sitting there to be able to be used.
And when we talk about moving things over in terms of capital, we've already allocated in our long-term planning our capital resources.
Yes, so in general,
It's not as if there's no cost to this, because if we're gonna move this over, something else gets postponed or
It
doesn't
is-
happen.
it is likely that, next year's a great example. So if we're going to go forward with a fire truck, as is the plan as of now, the capital asset reserve will kick in, but you're going to be drawing down the fund balance and capital. So, the capital is maintaining a high fund balance, but again, this gets back to how much ever you want to capitalize with software. What is your long-term plan with capital in relation to the other decisions you have to make with the pool bond and such?
So I think when it comes to this, we really have two decisions to make. And both of them would require an amendment, because right now proposed our proposed budget, which serves as our baseline, is the 4%. So I think what those of us sitting at this table need to decide is, do we want to add, is there anyone who feels strongly enough about a change that they want to add an amendment, offer an amendment, excuse me, that does that? And I think we'd have to do a salary amendment and a stipend amendment separately. I don't think they can be the same. We could just go ahead and consider that now. We could also instead look at all the other amendments, see where we are at the end of that, because that will impact what our scenarios look like. And then come back to this stipend and salary question when we've informed ourselves better about the other decisions we're going to make. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Then I think we'll have Eric bring up the amendments one at a time for discussion. Now, someone will have to move for the adoption. Mr. Peterson doesn't get to do that.
Nope, I do not. I am not a member.
I don't think I get to do it either. So
You certainly do. You have every right as a member to move for adoption. They are labeled. I just want to go through budget amendments. So if you see the first one in front of you, amendment number down under finance use, you'll see like GF-1. Essentially what that means is the general fund is the main fund related to this, and then what number in order that we have them. I will probably go a little bit out of order so you can all track with the amendments out of sequential orders I've given to you where the money's moving from, so you can see where we're moving and how that money's flowing, if that
and
works.
can we bring that other one back, please?
The scenario.
Yes,
Yeah.
because then
Yeah,
you
so-
can fill, those
Sure.
can get filled in as we adopt or fail to adopt
Exactly.
amendments.
So Madam Mayor, I would look first to the amendments you have that says GF-2. It's the transfer of the ARP funds to the general fund balance.
All right, do I have a motion for adoption of amendment GF2?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the adoption of amendment GF2.
Second.
Right. Eric's been through this. Do we have any questions or comments on this one? All right, let's go ahead and vote.
Am I running roll or you? I'm running roll. Okay, roll call.
Okay. Someone just asked us.
All right, I'm just going to go in the order I have people listed. So does that work for everyone? Okay, Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd.
Yes.
All right, amendment GF-2 has been adopted.
So we have now moved 1.4 million from ARP fund balance to the general fund balance. I would call up amendment SIF, Special Initiative Fund -1, which would create the Special Initiative Fund and move $950,000 from the general fund balance to that new fund.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the adoption of amendment SF-1.
Second.
SI.
All right, are there questions or comments about this?
This money just sits in a sub fund of the general fund.
This is a separate fund. So just like you see in the fund statements, there will be a Special Initiatives Fund created.
And can it be removed back over to general
Can
fund?
be
whenever?
moved unlike all the other funds, there's no revenue distinction or any kind of expenditure distinctions that are required by law under this. We're just creating another fund for more one-time, and we don't know if these will be ongoing programs or such, and those kinds of funding streams.
All right, thank you.
All right, other questions? Right, I think we're ready for the vote.
I'll go backwards. Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes, so amendment SIF-1 is adopted.
We'll now move into, in that special initiative funds appropriations and designations to certain. This is the Bliss Amendment SIF-2 on sustainability. Within that, from that 950,000 appropriates 100,000 into the sustainability program, 25,000 for the contribution to the stormwater management plan, 25,000 for the green dining micro grant program, $25,000 for implementation of any greenhouse gas or stormwater plans recommended out of said planning. Fit 19,500 to EV charging and solar installation micro grant program for residents, and $550 for a greenhouse gas inventory fee.
What is 5,000?
Well, I'm gonna, since
5,500.
it's her amendment, I'm gonna give Councilmember Bliss the first opportunity to say anything if you want to about this
Okay, I mean, I can
amendment.
give you background on this, if you
It-
all are interested in hearing that.
Just briefly, I
Okay,
think.
yeah, I will not go long. So this was part of for
for the past year, Sustainability Commission and Todd have been working on priorities and goals based on Forever Webster Groves. After a lot of discussion, we've learned that in order to get some of these grants that are federal grants, we have to have a plan to make a plan, and we have to have a plan to get a grant. So what they have done, we've all done together, is decide that stormwater management plan is past due, as well as a greenhouse gas inventory is the first step needed to be taken. And then based on that, coming up with other ways to help businesses with the micro grants and residents with micro grants that help towards our sustainability initiatives.
All right, thank you. David, I believe you had.
I was just gonna ask, what is the green dining micromanage?
So the Green Dining Alliance is a program, and the BDC and sustainability have both endorsed going into this model. So there's also some business development money. But this is about helping food service industry establishments across Webster Groves achieve more green practices and a culture of those green practices in their provision of services. Olive and Oak is a part of this. I think Maypop is also, I think Llewellyn's is a piece of it. There's many different provisions. I think it's Maplewood. I know Jamie's sitting behind me and going to tell me if I'm wrong, but there are many that what you find is, and especially with the ARP funds and now special initiative funds that we have the opportunity to help open that door for those businesses in terms of the small fee for certification, and then micro grants to how am I a business that if we're going to compost, how do I do that in a way that I don't stink up my back door where my customers are coming through, things like that. And, there's some functional things to that. How do we get to purchasing of, biodegradable plateware and such like that if we're going to go that route? So those kinds of micro grant programs would be built into that. And both BDC and sustainability have endorsed the city moving into that world.
Thank you.
So I know Jamie gave us presentations on a couple of suggestions and wish lists for sustainability. Where do these sit? And
This, as far as I understand, from Councilwoman Bliss, is the Sustainability Commission's plan and request of the council.
Yes, these are like their first goals.
Okay.
Can we talk a little bit more about the EV grants and how that kind of works? If we approve the amendment, are we approving that program at the same time, or we're just allotting money for that program, but we'll talk about it more later?
Yes, I mean, I think the overall idea was to find ways to help residents pivot towards more sustainable practices. EV charging and solar are kind of like the most commonly thought of, and that is a good place for residents to start. So this would be education and small grants to help them implement either of these practices. And we thought it was important to have a focus rather than a broader, all the options. We're just giving 2 options right now.
But to answer your question, yes, I believe that the structure of the program will come back to
Later.
us. I mean, it needs to
Yes.
come back to us for approval before it's operationalized.
Okay.
So if we don't like, don't get nervous, but if we don't like the plan, we
But
can
we don't
say,
have to
we can
dig
say,
into
no,
deep
we're not
tonight.
going to
We don't
spend
have
this
to get
money.
way
No,
into the
No.
weeds
no,
tonight.
we,
can just say,
not
like,
at all.
Sounds good. Okay. That
Any
helps.
other questions or comments on amendment SIF-2?
I just need to know who the second was. We didn't get that.
I'll second it.
All right, then I think we're ready for the vote.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes, amendment SIF-2 is approved.
SIF-3 is similar to this past year's appropriations with business development. This would create $50,000 in the Special Initiatives Fund, $25,000 to go into the Green Dining Micro Grant Program, $15,000 for work in Webster Groves and other business marketing, and then $10,000 for other business development initiatives that may arise. This comes out of the BDC conversation, and tomorrow's BDC coffee is sort of where that 10,000 is located, those next ideas that are being heard from the community and such.
Are there questions or comments?
Do need an author, a motion.
We're gonna.
Oh, yeah, I forgot the whole motion thing. Can we get the motion first,
Oh, yeah.
David, and then we'll have discussion? Is there a motion? Sarah, you're doing great on this.
Keep going. Yes, Mayor, I move that, that we adopt amendment SIF -3.
Second.
Okay, yes, David.
So we'll have, if this passes, we'd have $50,000 in the green dining micro grant.
That's correct.
So
Between the two commissions and as a staff level looking at it, that's the closest one to being ready to operationalize because there are other municipalities that have done it. The micro grant beginning of that draft has already been put together by the team. And so I think we're going to be with a number of food services places that we have available that have exercised some sense of interest in just being operationalizing. I think that will be our first, I want to call it victory and success out of the program.
Is there any clawback provision? Like, for instance, say we give them X number of dollars and then they leave for a bigger space in Maplewood and.
Sure. We can build that all in. So, and again, no different with the other micro grant program, green dining will come to you on those provisions because we're essentially going to be moving city money out. So.
All right, additional discussion? All right, I think we're ready to vote.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes, amendment SIF -3 has been adopted.
Mayor Arnold, next would be SIF 4. This is creating the reserve appropriation for flood property buyouts at 500,000. I want to be very clear that this does not, this creates the reserve appropriation. This is not obligating the city anyway to do the buyouts. It is simply providing the funding in FY 24.
It is our intention to create protocol and policies for this when we consider using these funds.
That's correct. So if the FEMA buyout model is what you wish to go under, which is where this estimate comes from, there are certainly things from the federal level that we have to do with those properties. If the council decides not to do that, and I know you and I talked to Councilmember Smith and want to look at other ways that to help owners of those types of properties rebuild in a way that's more flood safe. I'm going to use that term. I don't know if that is, we can talk about how to use those funds in that regard. But again, this puts the money in that pot, but all the decision how it's going to be used will ultimately have to come to the council for that provision.
And after we receive all the information from FEMA, I guess, and there's no other use, it can either sit there or we can move it back.
That's correct. You move it to another use at any time.
Yeah, I appreciate the clarification. I do not want anyone to walk away thinking council has made a firm and final decision on this by making this amendment, because I do think we have lots of discussions and still we lack information that we really need.
This just puts us in a good position to be able to make the decision when it's time to make the decision.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Yes, Mayor, I move that we accept, that we adopt amendment SIF -4.
Second.
Further discussion? All right, let's go ahead and vote.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
No.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. All
Six-
right, SIF -4 has been adopted.
Madam Mayor and members, amendment SIF -5 out of the Special Initiative Fund creates the programming fund for DEI at $50,000.
Do I have a motion to adopt SIF -5?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move that we adopt amendment SIF -5.
Second. I do have a question.
Please go ahead.
At any time, can we move money into this account
Absolutely.
to
Yes.
further our DEI initiative?
Yes,
Thank you.
There aren't any restrictions on the special initiative fund, right?
That's
We can
correct, so-
move into general fund, out of the general fund.
correct. Yeah. The restriction in terms of moving other funds, so things like the capital fund, if we took capital fund out of capital fund and moved it to special initiative, that amount we moved, say $100,000, would have to be related somehow to capital expenses, even though it's in the special initiative fund.
All right, other questions or discussion? I think we're ready to vote on this one.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. SIF -5 has been adopted.
We will sit on SIF 6 for a moment. Mayor, and I'll come back to that, but we will go to LACARF 1, LCARF. It's the Large Capital Asset Replacement Fund number 1. This would provide $300,000 from the general fund balance as a transfer out to seed that large capital asset fund.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move that we adopt amendment number LCARF-1.
Second.
So one question for me on this one. We talked about this being $300,000 is also the the amount set for the price of something that we buy out of this fund. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's the policy that was adopted.
Other than fire engines, what do we spend this much money on?
Theoretically, ambulances, you're getting there with some of the
Okay.
larger vehicles. So the aerial boom truck, with cost inflation could touch into 300,000 and such. Also, some of the prices we do give you and those costs
Yeah.
include the trade-in value. And so if the trade-in values change, sometimes those costs cause inflation. But it's meant to be for those larger asset reserves.
All right,
So
thank you. That's
yeah.
helpful.
So this is just starting.
That's correct. This is providing a seed injection into that fund. And then every year that half of the unused appropriations in the capital fund.
Mhm.
If we have $100,000 not spent, 50,000 is going to go into the reserve by the policy you adopted earlier this year.
And we're
So-
seeding it from general fund.
We're seeding it from the general fund, yes. We don't have to. We could leave the general fund and take it out of the capital fund balance, but it seemed to be an appropriate use.
Other questions or comments? All right, I think we're ready for the vote. Thank you.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. The LCARF-1 amendment has been adopted.
If we're doing so good on capital, how about we talk about capital next, huh? CIP 1. This is Councilmember Smith's police pistols. Councilmember Smith, I want to be very clear. I wrote this as accelerating. It's currently in the SIP plan for FY 26 to purchase the new pistols, accelerating that to fiscal year 24. So we would not effectuate the purchase until July. It's not this fiscal year, it's the budget we're dealing with in 24. So I just want to make sure that I wrote it the way you wanted it in that regard.
Yes, it's just a small amount and the information we received that we get the trade-in value for the pistols that they'll turn in. Initial cost after that is like 15,675, and I think that includes a 10% variance, doesn't it not?
So, yeah, so the total cost is somewhere in the 30,000 sums. We will trade in the guns and get 15,000 off of the bill. So it's about 22,000 is the total cost. That quote's only a 30-day quote. Obviously, it's going to expire before the new fiscal year starts. So we built in up to the 25,000 just to have a little buffer to make sure we could effectuate the purchase spot on.
And the chief did mention to me that whatever that trade-in value is at the time of payment, we give first right of refusal to our officers to buy the gun at that trade-in value if they wanted to.
What's the purpose of accelerating?
It's such a small amount. Their current pistols, I believe, are 12 years old. The chief mentioned that the ammunition is getting more expensive and hard to find. And then actually, I was surprised at the trade-in value we're getting. If we wait 2 more years, they'll be worth less.
Captain Perks, you're coming forward. You like to make a comment?
Thank you. Appreciate that. Actually, Councilman Franklin, to address that, the actual pistols we are carrying currently, I'll get technical for you for a minute. We're carrying 6-hour P226s and P229 40 caliber pistols. The manufacturer Sig Sauer no longer produces these pistols at all in the 40 caliber. They no longer are producing the parts for them. Some of our pistols are upwards of 15 to 18 years old, with the majority of them being about 12 years old. The repairs are getting hard to do, and the ammunition is getting harder to find. So accelerating the purchase on that is greatly, the law enforcement industry is transitioned over to 9mm pistols. And so Councilman Smith doing this it's just everybody's going to 9mm, and it's getting harder to repair, harder to find, harder everything on the 40 caliber pistols. Or we're way past due.
Plus we get left some trade-ins if we wait another 2 years.
Yes, the trade-in value will decrease if we wait longer and longer because the 40 caliber pistols, they're,
Obsolete.
How many
Yeah,
repairs were done in the past year?
it's firing pins, or not firing pins, I'm sorry, the disconnect, I gotta get technical on it, the disconnectors, the internals. Every 3 years, we have to completely rebuild the internals on the SIGs, and there's about 26 different parts on the inside of them. And the kits to rebuild those. I have to pull our maintenance records up on them. So I shouldn't say repair, it's just a rebuild on them. We have to rebuild the internals on them every 3 years.
That's manufacturer warranty or?
It's maintain the manufacturer, not a warranty, but the, I forget what they call it, but yes, that we have to rebuild them every 3 years. The kits aren't expensive, but we can't get them, and we do rebuild them to keep the warranty, the liability on from the manufacturer, because it's a duty carry with it.
How many shots were fired in the line of duty last year?
None.
It still sounds dangerous. I mean, good,
This
you didn't
just
have to
sounds-
fire a shot, but
Yes.
It just sounds to me like good planning. I mean, there's
Yeah.
lots of
Yes,
variables and it
yes.
seems like a.
We
plus.
hope that we never fire in the line of duty,
Right.
but we have to plan for if we do, that the weapons work.
Why wasn't it included in the 2024 originally then?
I can't answer that question. The chief of police would have to answer that question.
Doing my review of the budgets, and that one just stuck out. I mean, it was just something that should be done right away.
Is there additional discussion?
Dr. Peoples, can I ask you if you have a thought on this?
You can ask me anything you'd like.
Do you have a thought on this?
So to Councilman Franklin's question, Chief Curtis was appreciative if it could be moved forward, but when we had our budget meetings individually with department directors and chiefs, it was not necessarily on his priority list. But given the opportunity to move it up, it would be a need. He did share some of the additional cost and less trade-in value if we waited, but he also felt like there were several of their other requests that I did recommend and put forth.
And are we already,
Higher priority.
Correct.
we're already doing those higher priority ones?
They were right. That's up to council. I recommended
I mean,
them to be done.
as recommended as it states right now,
Yes.
those are,
They are.
sorry.
Oh, no, you're good.
Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm curious. I originally walked in tonight thinking I was going to vote no because the chief had put it in 26. I now understand what you're saying. I guess, do you have ideas of where you want this 25,000 to come from in the amendment? Or is this just for additional consideration when we're talking about the deficit that we're going to address anyway?
Well, there's no impact on the general fund. It's coming from the capital improvement fund.
Oh, of course it is. Thank you. Got my signals crossed. Okay.
And we have that. We haven't allocated all the capital improvement
Yeah.
fund dollars for this next year.
Depending on what all council does approve, and yes, we can find the 25,000, but there's quite a bit built into the capital plan already.
All right. Any other questions or discussion?
I think
We had a
need to just-
motion.
Thank
Did
you.
we have a second?
No.
No.
We need a second.
Second,
You're the motion. You can't. be the
Yeah,
second.
you can't. Oh, no, Sarah, you can be the second. By definition, it's his amendment, so he makes the motion
But you did, you made it, so you have.
by offering, yeah.
Madam Mayor, make motion for CIP -1 be approved.
Second.
All right, further discussion? Let's have the vote.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
yeah.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes. All right. CIP -1 is adopted.
So Madam Mayor, we have two more to go. We did move, we'll get to SIF 6. So why don't we go SIF 7? This is Councilmember Hickson Shepherd's amendment to fund the Stormwater Master Plan update at 150,000 in the Special Initiatives Fund. I want to be clear that if we doing this, since the Bliss Amendment was adopted, the one earlier that had the $25,000 contribution, that we would change the amended amount to 125,000. So that together there is 150 total.
Would you like to make any comments?
I mean, this is to fund the intuition and logic proposal to update our stormwater master plan. So I feel like it goes wrong with other stormwater things that we've been talking about. We've got the support from sustainability, and this is a high priority for a green space advisory council as well.
Right. Questions, comments?
Can you remind me, are we getting grant funding for this at all, or is this just us?
They are seeking grant funding, but I don't think it's for the master plan. I
Okay.
think that this is one of those things,
You have to
like
do
Hannah
first.
was saying, council member Bliss was saying, that we need to do this so that we can get grant, to set us up for grant
Mhm.
funding.
So
Can Todd, would you mind commenting on that if you would? Do you believe that this, because to be honest, you're writing grants now all the time. Does this put us in a better position to seek grants?
I don't do stormwater grants, so I don't.
Yeah,
really
sorry, I
have
asked the
an
wrong
answer to
person.
that, but,
Okay. May I ask?
I have heard that though, that you have to have a
Okay.
master plan adopted. And ours is 20 years old, so it needs to be updated, so.
And we did talk at Green Space about, like, do we just need to fully adopt the one from 20 years ago? But things have changed and, storms are different, like, it's just time to do a new one. So we had talked last council meeting about maybe putting this in the current year's budget, since we currently have a surplus. That would be fine, or we could put it in next, like, whatever works, but this is a high priority for green space, and I would venture to say for stormwater or for sustainability as well, whether that's in FY23 or FY24, whatever kind of works there.
I mean, and it's a priority for residents as well,
Yeah,
a lot of people.
absolutely.
Not failing, but just say underperforming stormwater management. So it affects a lot of people.
It does, and not just in the areas that have been
Right.
in the news for flooding.
Yeah.
But so it affects a lot of people. So how far is this going to? Is this again a seed, or this is just?
This is a citywide,
to-
just stormwater plan that would have recommendations for the city to follow. So it doesn't fund all the recommendations because we don't know what those are yet, but it funds the planning process. It's already gone out to bid. A vendor's already been identified.
So I'm just going to draw your attention. We're not considering right now, but we do have amendment SIF-6, which we have not done yet, correct? And that was to provide 100,000 seed funding to the Special Initiatives Fund. So that was undesignated seed money. If we were to adopt SIF-7, essentially that would take the 100,000 that we would have, if we adopt SIF-6, we're going to take that money right away and spend it on stormwater. Or are we talking about putting an additional $150,000 into
That's
the
the reason I held-
125?
So the reason I held that amendment is so the overall transfer we've made into the special improvement fund so far is 950,000. Before these amendments, we've approved 700,000. We have one to do that moves the comprehensive plan to the special initiatives fund. So that would be now 850,000. And so the reason I have held this one is, we would have to come back and ask for you make an amendment to add more to the transfer value into special initiatives fund. It doesn't have to be in the special initiatives fund. If you want to do this, we can now move it to stormwater. I mean, there's other places for it. This was in our conversation today, the easiest spot to put it.
But essentially, we have over a 1 million some ARP funds that we are now calling special initiatives, correct?
Yes, so you have, other than 150,000 that you have left in the general fund so
Yes.
far tonight.
Yes,
You have now given an appropriation for almost all of them.
okay.
What about spending it in the current year? Is that feasible to actually expend that in the months that are left, or is that not really an option?
Thank you, Councilwoman Hickson Shepherd. It is an option, considering that the bid's already been done. We know the price. So yes, we could move it into FY23. If I may, Madam Mayor, I have a couple of questions. Mr. Ray? What is the overlap or connection, if any, with MSD and the current plans that they are working on?
So our stormwater master plan is for smaller projects that MSD will not consider at all.
Okay.
They look at their bigger scope pictures with their systems. We're looking at backyard floodings,
Okay.
street floodings.
Thank
So
you. That's,
then those are things, those are smaller projects that MSD won't touch.
that's helpful. So is there? I get that MSD will not do them, but is there any connection, communication, collaboration with MSD? I'm asking because my concern, and I certainly support it, we've got to address stormwater. But I'm concerned that we would get results or recommendations back and put forth a plan that perhaps does not align with other work that MSD is going to do.
Yeah, the consultant will work with MSD as they're developing in the plan. Yeah.
Thank you. That
Okay.
was my only question. But Councilwoman Hickson Shepherd, to answer your question again, is that absolutely, we could fund it out of FY 23. That would, as Mr. Peterson will say, will change some of the fund balance, our surplus, how well we went, but it can be funded however way council would like it funded.
And it wouldn't, like, we would still have a surplus, right?
It doesn't have to be
Mhm.
general fund. So
Yeah.
it could come from the stormwater fund
From the
would probably
stormwater
be
fund.
my recommendation. If you're not going to go this route, if you're going to go the current year.
I mean, my concern about taking from stormwater is that we do have culvert projects coming up
That's true.
as well. So I'm hesitant.
We have lots of projects for limited
I'm
resources.
hesitant for that. I mean, if we can use, I mean, I guess if we use ARP funds, it doesn't really matter if it's FY 23 or FY 24 because it's basically the same bucket. But if we had one-time funds from FY 23 that we haven't spent, that we're gonna put us in a surplus at the end of the year, maybe we could use that.
That's absolutely true. So there will be some ARP funds. That 1.4 represents the idea that we're going to spend out everything we appropriated in FY 23. There will be ARP funds that do roll into the general fund once we do the soft close, that idea that, you know, when the fiscal year is done. So there is going to be probably a look back at 300,000, maybe 400,000 that we're coming back to say, where do we put these funds? They're going to all be claimed as revenue loss under the amendment you adopted, but it's going to sit in the general fund balance.
So not, since this is your amendment, I think the question is, you just maybe want to tell us what your preference is, or if you wanted
Tight to do it in FY 23, because that would be fastest, easiest, and takes it out of this conversation to a degree.
So, colleagues, what do you think? Councilwoman Hickson Shepherd's asking, so
If you take it out of this year, I guess, what would it make our overage look like? I mean, surplus.
So the estimates right now, if it's a true 150, you would still have a surplus, 13,000 roughly. If we use the general fund, you could use other funds for it. The ARP fund is open, so we could encumber the money under the ARP fund that exists now as well. And then, you know, move that encumbrance over. If you do decide to do it this year, I think we'll have to come back. We'll circle back next meeting on the sustainability amendment that we just adopted that puts 25,000 towards that. And do we pull that from current funding and, you know, just adjust those things? So
Realistically, we only have 6 weeks left. I mean, for us to contract some, you know,
So-
for this, the money
So-
can still be there.
well, the money will still be there. It's about the encumbrance, right? So
Yeah.
we have money that we encumbered in 21 that's still being paid
Mhm.
out in this fiscal year. So the point being is by June 30th, if you're going to use the FY 23 model, is that contract signed? Once it's signed, we create a purchase order, that money's then
Yes.
locked up.
Okay.
So
all right, comments down here at this end of the,
It makes sense to me to do it in 23.
I'm okay with 23 as well. I'm sorry, I didn't know that we were going.
no, we don't have to go in order. That's all right. I just am trying to make
I
sure
gotta
that
figure-
everyone gets a
Does anybody
chance.
like not want to do it in
Yeah.
FY 23 for sure?
I think, I think I'd like to see it come out of the ARP or either out of the stormwater. I mean, I think it's an important project. I guess. Give me warm and fuzzy to see
Warm and fuzzy.
A surplus going in.
Yeah, so we can do it in FY '23 and take it out of ARP money and still do what we have done here.
I would like to see it come out of ARP.
So I'm going to suggest that you withdraw your amendment.
Okay.
Because that's for FY '24.
Okay.
And then make a motion, right? It's not an amendment, it's a motion.
Okay.
For us to move forward on the stormwater plan in FY '23. Is that?
Yeah, so I think you really just need to tell us, because we have to bring back a resolution on the 6th outside of the budget to approve. a
Okay,
copy.
so then all we need is a withdrawal of the amendment at this point.
How
I
does this
will,
affect
I'm
the other
officially
amendments
withdrawing the
that we already
amendment.
adopted?
So we will need to readdress the other amendment on sustainability, which we can do on the fly now or on the 6th. If you wish to keep that $25,000 in the sustainability program in '24 for another purpose, or remove it, take it down to 75,000 or designate a different purpose for it. But then also quite likely, I think what I'm hearing is the intent sustainability to contribute is potentially some of their FY '23. The council could say some of that pot of money we put in sustainability in FY '23 for ARP can contribute into the '23 purchase of that service. The contract that we would be approving next meeting.
So I can't remember if I'm actually even allowed to make a motion.
You are.
Oh, I just don't, because I try not. I'm going to move that we just keep the $25,000 from that amendment in the special initiatives fund for FY '24. Got a second?
For sustainability or
Just
in that fund.
just in that fund. We may end up using it for sustainability. I hope that there's a good idea that we can. I'm sure there is, because there are lots of good ideas, lots of places, but let's just keep it there for now. is
Mayor
my-
Arnold, I just want to be clear. So on SIF 2, do you want the $25,000 that we put in sustainability for stormwater management to stay in the fund or to stay in the sustainability program?
My motion is for it to stay in the fund.
The fund. Okay.
Now,
I know this
if
is,
anyone wants to amend my motion, they certainly can.
I know this is reconsideration and I don't want to get Neil going down a parliamentary road. So if we can all agree to reconsider this amendment, I think it's
Yes,
very simple.
That's right.
To do and such. And you were obviously with the prevailing side, but so essentially sustainability would have 75,000, but the 25,000 would stay in the fund, just not designated in the sustainability program.
That is the motion that I have made and my motion to reconsider this.
Has it been seconded yet?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Pam, are you okay with that?
Well, to be honest, there's probably
Always
something
be
else
honest.
that could be looked at, but since we were just considering $100,000 pot and we were trying to prioritize, and since stormwater has been so handily adopted, I would like to have a week or two to figure out if there's anything else for the 25,000.
Or you can simply move right now to make it stay with sustainability.
All right, I move that it stays with sustainability
But there's.
for
But you got,
1 year.
Is a motion.
No, I'm sorry, you need
Okay,
to
so-
amend my motion to suggest that the money
Okay,
stays with.
Amend your motion to amend SIF
It's
two.
yeah.
By leaving the $25,000 in the special initiatives fund to be used for sustainability efforts
Does that
in
need a
FY
second?
'24.
It does need a second.
I'll second that.
Can we fill the tree now? Let's just fill the tree for the heck of it.
so,
So you gotta-
so now you need to vote on the motion to amend,
Amendment.
Yeah.
Yes.
and then you'll vote on the motion as amended.
Yes.
Okay, so the
So-
first, yeah. Yeah, the first, no. What we're voting on right now is Pam's amendment to my motion.
And what would her amendment do?
Would preserve the money designation for the Sustainability Commission.
It would
Oh, so
simply
like
not be for
general
stormwater management. It would stay in 25.
Well, what's the purpose of that?
Just,
What,
Because there are other initiatives on being developed.
this is just
that
a
could be-
savings account. We can move it around. wherever we want.
And it's a savings account that's for the specific purpose.
Well, yeah, but I could come back next week and decide, oh, I don't want it in there. That's the
Not
great
if
thing
it's
about.
not, it's in the budget for a year.
Well, no, that's a great thing about the special initiatives fund is that there you can willy-nilly do whatever you want, it sounds like.
David
Okay.
approved, I mean, seconded Morris.
I
Yeah,
hear
yeah,
what you're saying.
Yeah, so,
Then
yeah,
You amended it.
Mhm.
David, you seconded again.
I-
Do you really mean? it?
no, Emily
Emily,
did, you did not.
Okay.
So-
Got all
so-
this?
Yeah, so we right now have before us, and I'm gonna go ahead, unless somebody else has another question for Pam, call for the vote on Pam's motion to amend the underlying amendment.
All right. Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Okay.
Do you want it to
Can you
go to
explain?
sustainability or not?
Yeah. Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin,
No.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember, excuse me, Mayor Arnold.
I'm gonna vote no, because it's my amendment, but
5-2, Madam Mayor,
excuse me?
5-2.
Yes, so
That's okay.
Councilmember Bliss's amendment carries, which means we now vote on the amended amendment, which means the $25,000 stays in the special initiatives funds currently designated for the Sustainability Commission
Doesn't, but not storm sustainability program,
Mhm.
program. Yeah,
clear?
not commission,
Okay.
sorry.
and it is not designated the stormwater management.
Correct.
plan.
All right, do we all get what we're voting on now that we went down this road?
We're
All
pretty
right.
much just trying to keep the money with
Is there a motion?
sustainability.
Yeah, there's already a motion that's
Yeah,
in
I think
place
there
and
was
it's
a-
been
there
amended.
was a-
Mhm.
So we need to.
You just need to vote.
Okay.
It's now a
Yes.
roll call vote.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
7-0.
Okay, so we fixed that. It took us a while, but we fixed that. part.
Every year we have one that we do this on, so. All right, so Madam Mayor and members, the reason SIF 6, to be very clear, if you want SIF 6, you don't have SIF 6, so I
We
didn't
don't
hand
have
this
it,
out.
no.
Let me explain this real quick. You've already moved $950,000 to the Special Initiatives Fund. When we talk about the comprehensive plan, that would be 850,000 spent if you approve that. This $100,000 amendment, which you don't have, I'm holding in my hand, for future use, if you don't want to appropriate it, means it doesn't go in the budget. It just sits in the fund balance and sits there. We don't have to do anything. If you want to appropriate it so that in fiscal year 24, if something comes up, we can easily move the money without having to come back and talk to you all, then we need to approve
If
this.
something comes up like what?
So if we do say sustainability, like we decide, here's a great opportunity, we've got a new grant match that we want to put in for some stormwater thing, not the plan, right? But something else. We could, that have 100,000 just sitting there in reserve that without needing council to act, the manager can say, move that money up to use for such purpose. Or you can leave it in the fund balance and all that comes back to you for that decision. So that's the only purpose of this amendment, whether or not you want to appropriate it in the year or leave it in the fund balance.
And this came from where this was left over from everything else that was.
That's
moved
correct. So
over
this
there?
is the move of money, we moved the ARP to the general fund and now over to this SIF fund.
Mhm.
And the seeding for the future, because the special initiatives fund doesn't have any revenue source. So we're planting a seed, we're putting a little money aside for future years on these one-time type projects.
Which could ultimately relate to our strategic plan or something.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be anything about sustainability or DEI, could be
Right.
something totally different.
You can put in DEI.
Correct.
So we've already voted to move it into special
It's
initiatives.
in the
So
fund
this is to appropriate it within special initiatives.
if you want to appropriate.
For some.
It would just be in a
special
reserve
limit.
appropriation. It would just sit there.
So we're just putting the name appropriation
I
on it.
I think the difference is, so the bottom line right now, if you adopt the comprehensive plan, which I guess you probably will, the bottom line spend on the special initiatives fund is 850,000. If you approve this, it'd be 950,000, even though you don't have a plan for it. The way our controls work, the manager has the ability then if those bills do come up, that's something you want to do, we don't have to amend the budget with council. They can move that money into those programs that may arise.
But if we wanted to come back to council, then we wouldn't
Then
pass
you would
that.
keep it in the fund balance.
And if we didn't pass the comprehensive plan,
Then you would have 250
then you
in the
would
fund
change the
balance.
amount on that amendment.
Exactly.
So do we need to do the comprehensive plan next?
We don't have to. I mean, it's going to sit in the fund balance. We've already moved that money, so we certainly can go in any way. So I wanted to explain where the seeding came in. We put it in the fund balance. The question is whether or not you want to appropriate, put the money into play to be used for certain programs.
Right.
So-
Are there comments on or questions, additional questions?
Are we vote- are we voting
So
on this?
this is a question if you want to do that.
Yeah,
Really,
so this
haven't
is
even
why I
done-
haven't asked for the motion yet, because
Okay.
I mean, my personal preference is that, you know, if we're talking about that much money, that it does come back to us as opposed to, you know, simply being discretionary, and it has nothing to do with trusting how people spend money. It is about having the policy conversation about what that's going to be spent for as a council. And so to me, that still remains necessary.
I agree with that.
So I guess after saying that, does anyone want to now offer the amendment?
We'll still do that.
You can, you don't have to agree with me. I was just stating my personal preference.
And if nobody wants to pass the amendment, then we just don't.
Then it's
make a
not,
motion.
you don't make a motion.
Eric, what was your thought process in having it?
Having this listed out, well, we wanted to highlight the seating, right? And to make it balanced. So if we move 950,000, where's this extra 100,000 at, right? So it's sitting in the fund balance now, which is not an account. It's not a number in the budget you can find. It's just there as future seating. But if there are things, and this, I think some of this goes as we've heard from folks, well, I want this much money to do this project, but now I want some more. You can create the appropriation, even hold it in reserve and say, just under our policy, the manager has the ability to move that money. And really, it's me oftentimes that's moving the money to account for whatever spend is required. But the mayor's wisdom is well taken, right? If you want to have a policy control over what that fund is used for, then I would hold it in the balance and just simply have it seated there for the future. And if you don't use it, next year it's there.
Could we use that money to look at our scenarios for compensation?
So we certainly can. This essentially what I think what we would do is say if this 100,000, we would pull it back into the general fund and use it as fund balance in the general fund, or do a transfer. Either way, it's going to show up as a revenue transfer in some regard. So.
Do I have a motion? All right. This, I will say, and I think I'm right, Neil or Eric will correct me. You are perfectly able at our next meeting, if you think this over and want to offer this as an amendment, you can bring that back to us at our next meeting at the public hearing. Certainly to offer that if you get some more clarity. So it is still an option if you choose to bring that motion. All right, I think we have one more.
We have one more, and then I will explain one that you don't have, but it is important to the balancing. So in the recommendation. So GF1 is our last one for action tonight. This is a general fund affected amendment. We are showing it on the scenario right now. This is the comprehensive plan, moving the money, the funding for that out of the general fund to the special initiatives fund, and was a one-time cost. So you can see your expense line is pulled down. You can see your revenue line there, the green line. You've gotten much closer with that part of the scenario. So this is $150,000 reduction in general fund spending. And it's, I think I've explained it. You all know it. So Madam Mayor, I'll turn it to you for a motion in a second.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the adoption of amendment GF-1.
Second.
Right, is there discussion? All right, I think we'll go ahead and vote.
Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold.
Yes, amendment GF-1 is adopted.
And then, Madam Mayor, before we end with amendments, I would like you to turn to the big sheet that I've given you with all these scenarios. I want to walk through number 1, which is the pension fund change. We didn't prepare the amendment tonight because we wanted to make sure this is something as a recommendation, explain it to you. And before we go through the very serious accounting to make sure we get all the object codes and changes right, that would need be. Right now, general employee pensions for fiscal year 24 require the city to pay 8.3% of earnings for a general employee. So whatever the salary is, 8.3% above that, we as the city pay into the pension. Under the plan of the pension fund, 3.3% of that earnings cost, 3.3 of the 8.3 is paid by the pension fund, and 5% is paid by the general fund. Our recommendation is to flip that ratio so that 5% of the general employee pension cost is paid by the pension fund and 3.3% is paid by the general fund. That would result in a savings of $85,000 to the general fund, which if you click on the pension, yes, Jenny, it'll visualize there for us on that one. And then also, so you know, the pension fund right now is $101,000 to the good this year, meaning that we have not fully appropriated all the revenue. So putting the $85,000 in the pension fund does not create a fund balance use in the pension fund. So there's capacity in the pension fund, and this just inverts the ratio of which, from my understanding, there's nothing legal about that ratio. It is simply the difference between in 2017, when we raised the pension rates with the pension tax, the 3.3% was the new piece. They put that in the pension fund. That's where that came from years ago.
And just so we're absolutely clear for anyone tuning in at home, this does not in any way affect the size of a pension of any of our employees.
That's correct. No,
Yeah.
no, it is not our pension. Nothing is changing about the pension plan or any in such way like that. We are simply picking out of two different funds that we can use. What ratio will we spread that cost across?
And the funds are available in the pension fund.
That's
This
correct.
does not in any way like weaken that.
No, and the pension fund as well. Even after the big one-time payment we did is 1.6 million in surplus.
So but there's no motion tonight to.
We didn't do the motion because I really want to look for direction from you because I don't want to say it's a complicated accounting, but there'll be a lot of object codes that may need to change. And so I just wanted, before we did all that work, is this something you want to do? It's our recommendation from the manager. We would bring it back on the 6th to do that.
Is there room in the pension fund to do more? Like to change the ratio
The more even?
to more even?
Yep. So when you look at the fund statements for the year, the pension fund is, these numbers are pre-existing the big payment we made, but $106,000 will be added to the fund balance, meaning we have $106,000 of revenue we expect that will not have to go towards payments in the pension fund. This would take that 106 minus the 85, so you've got 21,000. So we could go further if you want. It was an easy explanation for me to make of flipping that ratio gave us a number within that balancing mark. Now, that said, you can also use the fund balance in the pension fund if you want to. If you wanted to go further and put, we can put almost all the general employee pension costs. We need to keep some of it in the general fund. It can be a minute percent, but by the percentage, by the tax that we passed in 2017, as long as we have a portion covered out of the general fund, we can have a portion covered out of the pension fund.
All right, so this is the manager's recommendation. You'd like to go, if we are generally supportive, do some more calculations for us.
To get
and
the actual
planning.
amendment,
Yeah.
fully written for you.
Is there anyone who objects to that? All right, let's proceed.
Awesome. So Madam Mayor and members, the only final thing I have, and I know we've talked a lot, we've got, you see now our red and green lines. I know it's a small number here, but I'm going to drive my mouse here. We've gotten this close on the deficit for this year. So the only question I asked for the 6th, and Mr. Franklin, this really gets to your question. Do you want me to model anything with the software, hardware costs in the capital fund and the impact? Not saying, do you want to have that modeled in any way more? We don't have to, we can, it's up to you. Or are we good?
Good with the way it is now, or modeling some of those over?
Me for is the,
Capital costs for software.
yes, I'm good as he explained.
So you don't need it modeled.
I don't need it. I mean,
You can't just put a Y in that box in that.
If we put a Y, go ahead. and put a Y.
That's the whole thing.
Right, that's all 387,000. What I'm saying is we can build a smaller, easier tool
Ah.
for you to see if you pick a lesser amount. If, let's say you wanted to move 100,000, what will that do? But then we'd also build in your capital fund, so you can see what it will do to the capital fund, and the other assumptions there. if you want that. If this is something you're not interested in, you can just tell me and we'll stop pursuing it.
Put a note, put a note. Let me see it. Maybe move too fast. You blinked.
I really like the idea, Eric. I don't have a good estimate of like what numbers should move over. I don't think you need to run a model for us necessarily, but maybe come back with what your proposal is from the 327,000.
What I anticipate doing, this is not hard to build this little thing right here. What I anticipate is likely I'll just build one of these and send it to you all where you can type in your own number.
Oh, awesome.
Right? Here's the list of everything we talked about in that 300 some thousand. And if you want to move 10,000, what does that do? Both the general fund and the capital fund.
Excellent.
Should we have the compensation discussion
Yeah.
still more tonight?
Yeah, we still do need to do that. My question to you all is, given the time and that we have some other things to do and that we worked through all these amendments already, would you be object to waiting and having that discussion at our next meeting, or would the city manager, director of finance, assistant city manager object to us having that in the next meeting?
What else we gotta do?
So we have closed session.
Oh.
So Madam Mayor, I do not object. What I would ask, if you all would not mind, if you please give me a phone call or shoot me an email of what your preferences are at this point with the compensation. I think you have the information you need unless you prefer another model ran. But if you can send me your preferences, I can tally, see where it is leaning, and then we can discuss that further at the next meeting.
All right, are we good then where we are right now with the budget for this evening? Are you okay with
I'm
where
good.
as a stopping point? Yeah, thank you very much for all the work that has gone into this. And thank you, colleagues, for we're getting better at this whole amendment thing.
We made some positive changes. I mean,
All right. Councilmember Franklin, would you call for the approval of the consent agenda, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to call for the approval and adoption of the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, let's have the vote, please.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Did we do
Yeah. Okay.
Did we do-
Not this one.
We did, yeah.
Just do that one too.
Okay.
All right. I believe Councilmember Bliss has a motion for us for closed session.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move that we have closed session pursuant to attorney-client privilege communication, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 1, close parens. Real estate, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 2, close parens, and personnel, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 3, close parens.
I think you need to put 4 in there too.
And 4,
Might as
negotiated cut, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
All of it.
number 4. Yes, negotiated contract, Missouri statute 610.021, open parens 12, close parens.
Second.
All right.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Councilmember Hickson Shepherd,
Yes.
Mayor Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss,
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander, Councilmember Richards.
Yes.
All right, that concludes our public portion of the meeting. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you especially to all our directors who toughed it out for the meeting. Appreciate it very much. We'll see you in a couple of weeks, right, for the next round.
We have 3. You have it's a